The moment I opened my eyes, I found myself thrust into the unforgiving world of train survival. It is a place where every passenger is forced to disembark at each station to explore, driven by the singular goal of staying alive. While the lucky few might stumble upon rare treasures, the unlucky ones often pay for their curiosity with their lives, proving that opportunity and danger truly walk hand in hand here. To survive, one must gather supplies and upgrade their carriage, eventually building a personalized train world of their own. However, I entered this game with an advantage no one else possesses, a one-of-a-kind ascension ability. Anything I hold in my hands can be evolved to its utmost potential, turning the mundane into the extraordinary. A crude dagger can be refined into an enchanted sharp blade and eventually become the eternal cutter. Even a simple white forest fruit tree can be elevated into a blessed tree, and finally, into Venus's golden fruit tree. Even a common beehive is not exempt, as I can transform it into a giant wasp hive or even a nano-future hive. While the rest of the world is still desperately fighting over a single piece of bread, I continue to grow stronger through this power, leaving everyone else trailing in the dust. I looked around my surroundings and wondered if even the train itself could be subject to this evolution. It seems my intuition was correct, because even before the first station arrived, I had already secured a massive lead. A notification pulsed in my mind, informing me that the ascension was successful and that I had broken a record, which in turn unlocked the Destiny Divergence module. As the conductor, I was told that I may now choose my next station. I braced myself as the system warned me to sit tight and hold on, for the train was finally about to arrive at its first stop. Before I continue my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It truly means a lot to me. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Now, let me take you back to what happened a few hours earlier. The haunting message echoed in the void, wishing me eternal life as the train prepared to depart. When I finally opened my eyes, a sharp ache pulsed through my head, and I found myself rubbing my temples while staring at the unfamiliar interior of a train carriage. I couldn't recall a single detail of how I had arrived here. My last memory was simply staying up late to watch anime before a sudden darkness swallowed my vision, leaving a frustrating gap in my mind. For a moment, I wondered if I had actually died from overworking and been sent straight to hell, but the same mysterious voice from before interrupted my grim thoughts. The voice announced that all survivors had awakened and began distributing the basic train regulations. I listened closely as the rules were laid out. I was never to abandon my train, and I learned that every 24 hours after departure, we would arrive at a new station. These docks would last for 3 hours, giving us the choice to disembark or stay on board. The goal was to collect resources to upgrade the train and unlock new modules, but the voice was clear about one thing. I was not to leave the train before reaching a station. The final command was simple and chilling: survive. As the announcement concluded with a strict warning to abide by these rules, I was informed that the first station would arrive in just 1 hour. The length of the message prompted me to reflexively pinch my cheek, and the sharp sting confirmed that this was no dream. As my headache began to fade, I struggled up from the cold floor to survey my surroundings. It was exactly as it appeared, a solitary carriage hurtling through an endless wilderness that streamed past the windows. The only notable feature was an oval-shaped device at the front, topped with a luminous screen that boldly displayed the words Train Control System. Without hesitation, I approached and touched it, prompting the system to offer me options for conductor info, train details, a trading platform, and a chat room. Curious, I opened the chat room and saw that it was at its full capacity of 10,000 people. The messages flooded past in a frantic blur. One person was screaming about their wealth and demanding to be let out. Another was searching desperately for their medication. And a woman named Xiaowen was calling out for her husband. Some wondered if they had been isekai'd, while one cynical soul even cheered about not having to deal with their boss the next day. However, my eyes caught a message from someone who claimed we were all just bad actors in a reality show. He declared that he was getting off immediately to prove it wasn't real, ignoring the warnings from others. Within a minute, his name vanished, and the occupant count dropped to 9,999. I felt a chill as I wondered if he had truly died, but I shook my head and decided to stop dwelling on it. I closed the chat and swiped over to my train details. It was a level 1 train with no extra carriages, moving at a meager 20 kilometers per hour. It possessed a basic workbench for recycling and a level 1 frame, wheels, and base. The requirements for an upgrade were steep: 100 kilograms of wood, 150 kilograms of metal, and 50 mechanical parts. The speed caught my attention. If arrival times were fixed at 24-hour intervals, I questioned why speed would matter at all. Furthermore, if 10,000 people were arriving at once, the scale of the station would have to be enormous. I looked out at the wilderness again, struck by a sudden unsettling thought. Perhaps the speed mattered because if I moved too slowly, something might eventually catch up to me. Continuing my inspection, I opened my personal info screen. My name and ID were listed alongside my sanity and stamina stats, both sitting at a full 100. The sanity meter warned of various stages of mental decline, from fatigue to total madness, while stamina was tied to my physical ability to function. There were no abilities listed, but under the talent section I saw a word that changed everything. Sublimation. When I looked into it, the system explained that I could expend stamina or sanity to evolve or upgrade any existence without any restrictions on category or level. I quickly searched the chat room for any mention of talents, but found nothing at all. If such powers were common, someone would have surely bragged about them by now, which led me to believe that talent holders were exceptionally rare. I pondered why I had been granted this cheat ability, and it dawned on me that I had always been slightly different back home. I remembered how broken computers would suddenly run high-end games after I touched them, or how regular cars seemed to reach impossible speeds. My friends used to joke that I was pleasing machine spirits, but I had always dismissed it as a series of coincidences. Now, this description confirmed that it had been real all along. I wondered how far I could push this power to sublimate anything. I walked over to the workbench where a water bottle, a loaf of bread, and a small knife had been placed as starter gear. I looked at the level 1 shoddy dagger and internally commanded it to sublimate. An invisible force instantly enveloped the crude blade, and I felt my stamina drop from 100 to 90. In an instant, it transformed into a level 2 enchanted sharp dagger. The excitement surged through me as the blade gleamed coldly in my hand. The talent actually worked, and the stamina cost was perfectly manageable. I swung the dagger, listening to it whistle sharply through the air, amazed that such a high-quality weapon had come from such shoddy materials. A new, more ambitious idea took hold of me as I looked around the carriage. The description had said I could sublimate any existence, and that had to include the train itself. Taking a deep breath with my eyes sparkling in anticipation, I approached the control panel and placed my hand firmly on the oval device, silently giving the command to sublimate. The invisible force manifested once more, but this time I felt my stamina draining at a much more alarming rate than when I had upgraded the small knife. A heavy exhaustion settled over me as I watched my stamina plummet from 90 to a mere 30. I collapsed onto the floor, huffing out a weary breath, yet I couldn't suppress a surge of exhilaration as I watched the train transform before my eyes. A notification confirmed that the upgrade was successful, bringing the train to level 2, and revealing the steep material requirements for the next stage: 200 kilograms of wood, 200 mechanical parts, and 400 kilograms of metal blocks. Beyond the physical changes, I had unlocked several upgrade options, and more importantly, a reward for breaking the record for the fastest train upgrade, a special module card. Once I managed to catch my breath, I took a moment to carefully examine the train's current status. Reaching level 2 had automatically improved the chassis, frame, wheels, and workbench, effectively doubling our speed from 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. What truly piqued my interest, however, was the sense that I could still sublimate this train further. Unlike the knife, which felt as though it had nearly exhausted its potential, the train's ceiling seemed much higher. I knew my current reserves wouldn't be enough to push it again immediately unless I tapped into my mental energy. But after remembering the warnings about sanity, I decided to temporarily shelve that dangerous idea. Instead, I turned my attention to the new upgrade options and the special module card. The level 2 upgrade menu offered 4 blueprints: a basic carriage for free, a water tank for 1 coin, a burst acceleration device for 5, and the ability to extend docking time for 2 coins. I frowned slightly, realizing that these train coins must be the local currency. Since I didn't have a single one, I worried that I might be forced into the free option and lose out on the others. Fortunately, the system confirmed that I could reserve these choices for up to 3 station stops. Relieved, I extracted the free basic carriage blueprint, noting its substantial material requirements. I decided against sublimating the blueprint itself for now, fearing that an upgrade might make the construction costs impossible to meet before I had even secured the basic resources. I turned my focus to the special module card, which materialized as a diamond-shaped card wreathed in pale blue particles above my palm. The description was frustratingly vague, stating only that it would grant a special module upon activation. Naturally, I couldn't suppress the thought of sublimating the card itself. Although my stamina was low, I still had my mental energy, and a quick meal of bread and water had miraculously restored my stamina to 50. I murmured to myself that testing it shouldn't be a problem, and silently gave the command to sublimate. The invisible force returned with a vengeance, and the card released a brilliant spray of blue particles that looked like shooting stars. From an outside perspective, the train must have looked like a comet trailing blue flames as it accelerated through the void. When the light finally faded, I felt a heavy lethargy settle into my bones. My stamina had dropped to 20, and my mental energy sat at 60, triggering a mental fatigue status. Despite the high cost of 70 total points, the result was worth it. The special module card had evolved into an exclusive module card. I lay on the floor examining the card, wondering what mental fatigue actually entailed, since I didn't feel particularly different. Perhaps my physical exhaustion was simply masking the mental strain. I offered a quick scattered prayer to every deity I could think of, from the ancients to the God Emperor, before finally activating the card. Azure light enveloped me as the system congratulated me on obtaining a unique conductor module called the Crossroads of Fate. Its effect was simple yet profound. My path would always present a second choice, and different choices would lead to different destinies. Before I could dive deeper into the details, the train's PA system crackled to life, announcing our imminent arrival at the first station. I was shocked to realize an entire hour had already passed without me noticing. With only 1 minute left, a second interface appeared, courtesy of my new module. I was presented with two choices: Platform 1, the swampland, or Platform 2, the armory. Recognizing this as the power of my exclusive module, I didn't hesitate. I chose the armory, reasoning that while others might be looking for food, nothing would provide more security in this world than weapons. As soon as I made my selection, the space ahead of the train distorted violently, resembling the open maw of a great beast. The train whistle shrieked as we plunged through the warped reality, and the surroundings transformed completely. We had arrived. The docking countdown began at 3 hours, and to my immense relief, the system reported that no hazards were detected at the station. The train gradually slowed to a crawl, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks fading into a heavy silence as I arrived at my first stop. Standing before the sealed door, I took a deep breath to steady my nerves, tightening my grip on my sublimated dagger before pressing the release button. Outside, the world was draped in an oppressive pitch-black void. Yet strangely, a massive building the size of a matchbox stood clearly in my line of sight. Looking up, I realized there was no sun in the sky, yet the road beneath me and the structure ahead were perfectly visible. It struck me then that space traversal is truly an incredible power. It certainly explained why all the trains shared the same arrival times despite the distances. I stepped off the train, reaching the entrance in fewer than 10 steps. The massive doors were shut tight, but I managed to pry a gap open with my dagger. As the heavy leaf swung wide, a wave of rotten stench hit me square in the face. I walked inside to find rows of neatly arranged wooden crates, the clear source of the decaying odor. Using my blade, I pried the rusted iron locks off the nearest crate. Inside, 2 bolt-action rifles lay half-buried in wood shavings. The system identified them as low-level marksman rifles, each equipped with 20 low-grade bullets, 2 guns and 40 rounds in just 1 crate. This was good stuff. I spent the next hour opening several crates in a row and hauling the loot back to the train. After several trips, the adrenaline-fueled strength I'd been running on began to hit its limit. My stamina had dropped to 15 points. The repeated use of sublimation had already pushed my physical boundaries, though my excitement had somehow allowed my spirit to recover to 70. With 3 hours of docking time and no energy replenishment, I realized I wouldn't have much strength left to move supplies if I didn't pace myself. After resting, I shifted from heavy lifting to exploration. In a side room, I spotted several sealed iron boxes on a shelf that reminded me of military supply videos I'd seen back home. The markings on the surface were blurred, but I felt a surge of nervous anticipation as I swallowed hard and pried one open. Inside were neatly arranged blocks of compressed biscuits, looking like bars of gold, and emitting a faint milky aroma mixed with a fermented tang. Regardless of expiration dates, I stuffed one into my mouth immediately. It was exactly what I needed, though I quickly realized I'd need water. These things quench hunger but leave you parched. I found 4 barrels of these rations, 80 biscuits in total, enough to sustain a man for half a month. Nearby, I found sealed barrels of water, but the smell was distinctly undrinkable. Still, I moved everything onto the train. Resources were resources. The armory was a cramped, semi-enclosed space filled with collapsed shelves and rotting debris. In 2 hours, I salvaged 42 intact rifles. The rest were rusted beyond use, fit only for the processing station. I also loaded up on iron and wood. Even if I didn't use them for my own upgrades, they would be valuable for trading. With 30 minutes left on the countdown, I decided on one last trip. My carriage was getting crowded, and I knew a second carriage was my top priority. I had the wood in parts, but I was still short on metal. I headed for the innermost area, bypassing the mess to check the final rooms. These looked like foreigner living quarters. The first few were empty, but as I entered the last one, I heard a sickening crunch. I looked down to see I'd stepped on a small leg bone from a skeleton. I muttered a quick apology to the brother on the floor. I wasn't particularly afraid. Even as a kid, horror movies amused me, and I'd never been fazed by the sight of the deceased. As I withdrew my foot, I noticed a dust-covered paper document bag beneath the remains. It was strange. Iron and wood had rotted to nothing in this place, yet this paper bag was perfectly intact. Intrigued, I snatched it up and jogged back to the train to use the system's appraisal function, just in case of traps. To my surprise and delight, the screen identified it as a level 1 treasure chest. I laughed, thanking the old bone brother and promising him a proper burial later. But as I moved to open it, I paused. If I could sublimate the train, surely I could sublimate this too. My stats sat at 30 stamina and 80 spirit. I reasoned that such a small bag wouldn't drain me too much, and I could always eat another biscuit to recover. Once I'd convinced myself, the decision was effectively made. I whispered the command to sublimate. My stats began to drain instantly. A warning flashed that my spirit had fallen below 50, plunging me into a state of self-doubt. I collapsed onto the floor like a fish out of water, staring blankly at the swaying ceiling lamp. After a moment, I sat up, my stamina at 20 and spirit at 50. Honestly, it didn't feel like a big deal. Aside from the heavy physical fatigue, the self-doubt state didn't seem to hinder me. The cost to reach level 2 was 40 points, higher than I expected, but the folder was now a level 2 treasure chest. It seemed it couldn't be pushed further, perhaps lacking the potential or being capped by a rule I didn't yet understand. I rubbed my hands together and opened the folder. The rewards flashed before me. 4 train coins, a Colt M191 pistol, and a level 2 blueprint for an external garbage collector. Reflecting on the 4 coins I had just acquired, I realized that this was the primary way to obtain the local currency. I opened my train details and saw that the options appearing after the level 2 upgrade were still available at the top of the interface. Without much hesitation, I spent 3 of those train coins to purchase the basic water tank blueprint and an additional hour of docking time, leaving me with only a single coin to my name. If I can manage to find another treasure chest at the next station, I might just gather enough to meet the requirements for that acceleration device. I noticed the departure countdown had shifted to an hour and 15 minutes, so I turned my attention toward the physical rewards from the chest. The Colt M1911 felt substantial in my hand. Compared to the mass-produced firearms I had salvaged from the armory, its craftsmanship was so refined it could be considered a work of art. I quickly deduced that the firearms in this world likely shared a universal bullet type, so I loaded a magazine with low-grade ammunition to test it out. Aiming at a wooden box outside the carriage, I pulled the trigger and watched as the crate instantly shattered into splinters. The sheer power of the shot took me by surprise, and I rubbed my slightly sore palm where the recoil had bitten into the webbing of my hand. Although this handgun used the same bullets as the ones from the armory, it was clearly twice as powerful. The thought of what it might become if I sublimated it crossed my mind, but I quickly shook my head to dismiss the dangerous idea. Now was not the time for such gambles, especially since my physical and mental reserves were hovering near their limits. It would be far wiser to wait until I had recovered. After putting the pistol away, I used the control system to examine the 2 blueprints I had acquired. The basic water tank would allow me to store water and prevent it from spoiling for 10 days, requiring only 10 kilograms of metal and 20 mechanical parts. The external garbage collector was even more intriguing, as it would automatically gather and store trash from the platforms before departure. It required 30 kilograms of metal and 100 mechanical parts, with an optional modification for an additional 300 parts that would allow the workbench to automatically recycle the waste into usable materials. Looking at my current inventory of 210 kilograms of wood, 60 kilograms of metal, and 220 mechanical parts, I muttered to myself that I could afford to build both. However, doing so would mean putting my first additional carriage on hold for the time being. I decided not to rush, as the extra docking time I purchased allowed me the luxury of a proper rest. When the countdown entered its final hour, I opened the trading platform to scout the market. The rules were peculiar. While conductors could only list items for sale after leaving a station, those of us still docked were free to purchase anything already available. This seemed like a transparent attempt to prevent station-to-station supply transfers, yet it did nothing to stop private trades or purchases by those currently docked. It felt like a glaring loophole, one that made me wonder if the entity behind train survival was subtly hinting that we could ignore the rules to a certain extent. I focused my efforts on trading for metal, scanning my pile of low-grade rifles and compressed biscuits. In a world like this, security and food were the ultimate commodities. However, as I refreshed the platform, I found that while some had posted metal, the quantities were tiny and the prices were absurdly inflated. It was clear that most people were just testing the waters rather than looking for fair trades. Turning to the chat room, I saw it scrolling wildly with messages from conductors who had already moved on from their first stops. One person complained about finding nothing but scrap tires at a garbage station, while another lamented arriving at a stinking grassland filled with black mud. When a few people pointed out that black soil could be used to grow vegetables, others mocked the idea, pointing out the lack of space on the train. The conversation shifted when someone posted a blueprint for a basic mechanical fishing rod, sparking a mixture of envy and confusion. It became apparent that many passengers hadn't found any blueprints at all. People quickly began haggling, offering their starting bread and water rations for mechanical parts. It was a desperate scene, with some even offering to trade for half a loaf of bread just to survive. The atmosphere turned sour when the topic of treasure chests came up. Those who hadn't found any grew hostile, demanding that others share their information for the sake of collective survival. Eventually, someone buckled under the pressure and posted a screenshot showing they had opened a level 1 treasure chest to find 2 train coins, a healing salve, and a blueprint for an aluminum insulation pad. Based on the progression of the rewards, I calculated that if a level 1 treasure chest contains 2 train coins and level 2 contains 4, then a level 3 chest should logically yield 6. Compared to my level 2 haul, the rewards from the first level seemed considerably meager, though I knew that medicine was a precious commodity in this world, and any amount of coins was a step forward. Suddenly, a message in the public chat caught my eye. A user named Li Xiaosheng was asking if anyone wanted metal, stating he had some available for trade and was giving priority to weapons. The fact that he was prioritizing armaments over food suggested he didn't lack basic survival capabilities. I preferred dealing with capable individuals rather than those who couldn't even fill their own stomachs yet, so I decided to reach out to him. A line of text soon appeared in our private chat as Li Xiaosheng asked if I was looking to trade for metal. I countered by asking how much he had, to which he cautiously asked how much I needed. It was clear he was being guarded, but his response confirmed he possessed a substantial amount. When I asked if he could produce 150 kilograms of metal, the chat went silent. I could imagine him staring at the message in disbelief. That was enough for a full level 1 train upgrade, and he likely wondered how I had already gathered the necessary wood and mechanical parts, or what gave me the confidence to make such a massive purchase. After a moment of hesitation, he replied that he could provide it, but questioned what I had to trade, noting that the starter dagger would only fetch him 10 kilograms. I simply asked how he felt about a rifle. Using the system's photo function, I sent him a picture of one of the average low-grade rifles I had salvaged. I offered him 1 gun and 20 bullets in exchange for his 150 kilograms of metal. His shock was immediate. He accused me of robbery, claiming that even a gun wasn't worth such a steep price. I remained unfazed as I played with a bullet, knowing full well that as the only person selling firearms, I held all the cards. I told him the price wasn't expensive at all, reminding him of the sheer value of a gun and the unknown dangers awaiting us at the next station. Having a firearm would significantly improve his chances of survival, and he knew I was right. He had obtained over 300 kilograms of metal and a treasure chest at his first stop, which likely made him feel like the luckiest person alive. But that pride clearly paled in comparison to the weapon in my hands. When he tried to lower the price to 100 kilograms, I stroked my chin and narrowed my eyes. He had revealed his hand by showing how much he wanted the gun, so I refused to budge. I told him he could take the deal or I would simply find someone else who was more eager. He gritted his teeth and asked for time to think, but I gave him only 10 seconds, claiming I was busy. He had no way of knowing I was still at the first station, or that I was focused on building a carriage rather than a simple engine upgrade. Finally, he hardened his resolve and agreed to the trade. He asked why I needed so much metal and if I had blueprints to mass produce these guns, clarifying that he wasn't trying to steal my secrets but wanted to know if we could trade again in the future. He boasted that he was confident he could reach level 2 within 3 stops, and offered to promote my weapons once he became known as a top-tier conductor. I found his confidence amusing. If he considered reaching level 2 in 3 stops to be strong, I wondered what he would think of me reaching it before even entering the first station. I decided to humor his delusions of grandeur and simply told him to proceed with the trade. I was curious to see how the system handled transactions. Following the prompts, I placed the rifle and bullets on an empty spot, and a virtual glow instantly swapped them for neatly stacked metal ingots. It was an incredibly convenient and interesting process, moderated by the system's impartial arbitration. With my new resources secured, I placed the basic carriage blueprint on the processing station. A translucent screen appeared, confirming the materials were ready. When I selected the option to construct, the wood, metal, and mechanical parts vanished, reassembling through a mysterious force at the rear of the train. The new carriage descended smoothly onto the tracks and connected to the locomotive with a satisfying click. The system notified me that construction was complete and mentioned that I could further modify it with glass and fiber. For now, it was a spacious, empty shell about 10 meters long, roomy, bright, and exactly what I needed. It lacked glass in the window frames and had no external door, requiring entry through the rear of the locomotive, but it felt right. A train shouldn't just be an engine, after all. I nodded in satisfaction and checked my stats. Deciding my stamina and mental energy were too low for further sublimation, I began moving my supplies from the locomotive into the new carriage. I still had 40 minutes left on the countdown, plenty of time to return to the armory and gather whatever remained. My current stats sat at a weary 21 for stamina and 59 for mental energy, leaving me in an official status of exhausted. Inside the train, I lay motionless on the floor like a salted fish that had lost all hope of moving again. During these final moments, I had drained my last reserves of strength, making 2 final round trips to the armory. But I hadn't forgotten my earlier promise. Despite the physical strain of hauling materials, I managed to use a shovel to dig a grave for those skeletal remains, and even erected an unmarked tombstone as a final gesture of respect. That marked the conclusion of my harvest at this station. As the departure countdown finally reached 0, the previously stationary train began to groan and slowly lurch forward. Ahead of the locomotive, those familiar spatial distortions reappeared, and the train steadily accelerated through the boundary, returning once more to the endless expanse of the desolate wasteland. Simultaneously, the train's broadcast system crackled to life. It announced that all conductors had left the platform and offered a hollow congratulations to the 9,892 individuals who had successfully departed from the first novice station. The voice then warned us that we had officially exited the newcomer safety period. Starting from the second station, there would no longer be a guarantee that trains would stop in safe areas. This announcement caused an immediate uproar in the chat. Some questioned the timing, wondering why we had seemingly left the platform an hour later than expected, while others realized with frustration that someone must have stayed an extra hour at the first station. There were even those calling me a cheater, and others lamenting that they hadn't realized the first station was actually safe. Some conductors shared grim stories, like one whose first station was a desert where they nearly perished in quicksand. I remained largely unaware of their bickering, as I was far too busy sitting on the floor organizing my final haul. My inventory was now quite impressive. 49 low-level marksman rifles, 1,100 rounds of low-grade bullets, 150 kilograms of wood, 104 kilograms of metal, and 162 mechanical parts. I had also salvaged a variety of usable tools like crowbars, shovels, and screwdrivers. I tossed the broken ones into the processing station for recycling and kept the rest as backups. My current blueprints for the water tank and garbage collector required 40 kilograms of metal and 110 mechanical parts, which barely made a dent in these newfound reserves. After placing the blueprints and allocating the resources, the control system allowed for their installation. I commanded the system to place the water tank inside the carriage and mount the collector on the left exterior. Once the installation was complete, I walked back to find a fixed metal water tank with wheels occupying a section of my new carriage. It could hold 1,000 kilograms of water and featured non-removable layers to keep clean and contaminated water separate. I poured in the 50 kilograms of polluted water I'd brought from the armory, feeling a slight pang of disappointment that I didn't yet have a purification system. Though I wasn't particularly anxious about it, I decided it was time to test the market, so I posted my first message in the public chat room. I stated that I was buying water, glass, fiber, blueprints, and various resources, offering firearms and food in exchange. As I expected, the mention of guns caused an immediate frenzy. While some shamelessly begged for weapons or asked if I was a big shot upgrading my train, others offered themselves as lackeys or tried to guilt-trip me into equitable distribution, for the sake of humanity. I noticed several non-Chinese names among the flooded private messages, which surprised me momentarily before I realized this world likely pulled people from all over, perhaps even different versions of Earth. I probably blocked anyone attempting moral blackmail or looking for handouts and began filtering for real potential. A woman named Shangguan Yingshui offered 20 kilograms of lake water, though she specified she wouldn't provide a container. I replied to her with a touch of detachment, noting that lake water could be lethal without filtration, and that she needed to show more sincerity if she wanted to trade for a gun. She seemed frustrated but asked me to name my price. I demanded 50 kilograms. In this world, water was arguably more precious than metal, especially since few people had storage containers even if they found a source. My true minimum was 30 kilograms of undrinkable water for one gun, but I knew I had the leverage here. Ultimately, I was only one person. No matter how many guns I held, converting them into bulk resources was the only practical path forward. She eventually agreed to the 50 kilograms, though she reminded me quite sharply that I would have to handle the storage myself. I couldn't help but wonder if I had quoted too low when the other party agreed so instantly. But I wasn't one for second-guessing my decisions. I confirmed the deal and prepared to proceed. But Shangguan Yingshui quickly added that she needed more bullets and food. It made me curious. Where was this woman getting so much water? Having large quantities wasn't necessarily shocking. She had mentioned it was lake water, so her first stop likely bordered a lake. But what truly puzzled me was how she was storing it. Until the 3-hour docking period at the first station ended, both the trading platform and the chat room were supposedly restricted. Had she found containers, or built them from blueprints like I had? I didn't ask. In this world, everyone had their secrets. I set my prices clearly. 5 low-grade bullets per kilogram of water, no container required on her end. For food, I offered military compressed biscuits at a rate of 1 biscuit for 5 kilograms of water. She agreed immediately, requesting 100 bullets and 3 biscuits. Combined with the previous rifle and its ammunition, that brought the total to 85 kilograms of lake water. When she asked if I had enough containers or if I needed to buy some from her, I told her it wasn't necessary and initiated the trade. The trading point materialized directly above my water tank. As the firearms and bullets vanished, 85 kilograms of water manifested out of thin air, cascading into the reservoir. Between this and my previous trades, I now possessed 135 kilograms of water. I stared at the clear liquid, resisting the urge to take a drink. It looked clean enough, but I knew that drinking unfiltered, unboiled lake water was a death sentence. We finished the transaction with a standard professional sign-off, and she silently sent a friend request, which I accepted without hesitation. Compared to the pretentious Li Xiaosheng, I preferred her quiet, no-nonsense style. I spent the next several hours successively selling off numerous rifles and ammunition. In return, I acquired the fiber and glass needed to reinforce my new carriage. Once I applied the upgrades, glass panes appeared in the frames, transforming the drafty compartment into a proper room. It was a bountiful harvest. By the time I finished, I had 21 rifles left. I hadn't stuck to fixed prices, choosing instead to sell whenever an offer seemed reasonable. These low-level items would only depreciate as people unlocked better blueprints, so hoarding them would have been unwise. Finally done for the day, I enjoyed a proper dinner of traded bread and mineral water before curling up in a warm corner of the front cabin. I was too exhausted to worry about survival. My only thought was sleep. As the train rumbled through the wasteland, I watched the high-hanging moon until my eyes finally drifted shut. I woke up shivering from the night's chill, rubbing the sleep from my eyes and stretching my stiff neck. The wasteland outside was as desolate as ever, shrouded in a cold, lonely light from the giant moon. I checked the timestamp, 3:37 a.m. The chat room was still scrolling, proving that few others were able to sleep as soundly as I had. Since I couldn't get back to sleep anyway, I brushed off the dust and stood up. My stamina and mental energy had mostly restored, which meant it was time for more sublimation. I decided to start with the Colt M1911. It was already a work of art, and I was eager to see what it would become, especially since the next stop was guaranteed to be dangerous. I commanded the system to sublimate, feeling the stamina drain away. The pitch-black frame developed faint, elegant patterns and grew slightly larger, now requiring a firm grip to wield. It had become a level 3 blacklight enchanted pistol, capable of consuming my stamina to convert standard bullets into armor-piercing rounds. The cost was 40 stamina points, which felt acceptable. I set up some metal scraps as a makeshift target and pulled the trigger while channeling my energy. A deafening blast and a searing muzzle flash followed as an armor-piercing round tore through the air, punching a perfect hole through the target. I was floored. Aside from the heavy recoil, it hardly felt like a pistol anymore. At a cost of 2 stamina per special round, it was a sustainable edge. The system hinted it could be sublimated further, but I decided against it. The recoil was already at the limit of what I could manage. I still had enough energy for more, so I moved into the new carriage and touched the wall, calling for a sublimation. To my surprise, it only cost 25 stamina and no mental energy. The space transformed into a level 2 cozy train carriage, imbued with enchanted warmth that maintained a constant 22 degrees Celsius interior regardless of the weather outside. No more waking up freezing for me. Satisfied, I retrieved a traded blanket and spread it on the floor. The stamina loss was the perfect cure for insomnia, and I knew I needed to conserve my energy for the second stop tomorrow. That night, while others stayed awake shivering in the biting wind, I slept in total comfort. I woke up at 10:27 a.m. and stretched my stiff limbs. I estimated that since we entered the first station at 1 p.m. yesterday, we would likely arrive at the next one around the same time today, though I wondered if my 1-hour delay would push my arrival back. When I stepped out of the warm carriage and returned to the locomotive, the temperature drop was jarring. My control panel was flooded with messages. As the unsafe second station approached, the value of my firearms was skyrocketing. One message from a user named Lu Zhu caught my eye. He asked if blueprints could be used for trading. Until now, no one had been willing to part with a blueprint, as they were essentially infinite production machines. I asked what he had, and he sent over a screenshot of a level 1 train seat blueprint. It was just a chair, hardly a top-tier item, but it was a permanent asset. I decided to trade, offering a gun and 10 bullets. I reasoned that while guns were precious, their value was temporary, whereas a blueprint provided endless utility. Lu Zhu was incredibly grateful, bordering on desperate. He claimed that without the gun, he would definitely die at the next station. His certainty made me wonder if he had a talent related to foresight or danger sensing. I didn't press him. I simply completed the trade and went to the processing station to manufacture my new black chair. Sitting in it felt like a return to civilization. I spent the final hour before arrival closing out a few more arms deals, selling 15 rifles and 300 bullets. I kept the rest for my own protection. With my stats nearly full at 98 stamina and 100 spirit, I took one of my own rifles and sublimated it. It cost 13 points and turned into a level 2 exquisite marksman rifle. It wasn't as powerful as my enchanted pistol, but it was a significant upgrade. As the countdown dwindled, the chat room grew quiet and oppressive. 30 minutes before arrival, my Crossroads of Fate module triggered, offering me a choice between a level 2 hunting platform, called the Goblin Camp, or a level 3 collection platform, called the White Forest. I noticed the module was providing more detail now, including station levels and types. I wondered if the armory had been level 1, and if my train upgrade had unlocked these higher tier options. I chose the White Forest, assuming a collection platform would be less hazardous than a Goblin Camp. The spatial fluctuations engulfed the train, and 5 minutes later, we were surrounded by a grayish-white light. Outside the window lay a forest of bone-white trunks and leaves. The system reported a 4-hour stay and a low-risk warning. Interestingly, no one in the chat had ever mentioned seeing hazard ratings, so I suspected that was another benefit of my exclusive module. I geared up, holstering my pistol, and slinging the rifle over my shoulder alongside a backpack of supplies. When I pressed the door release and stepped out, the world was tomb silent. The quiet was so absolute I could hear my own pulse. I scanned the deep white woods, wondering what exactly a collection platform had to offer besides wood. Then, through the silent trees, I spotted what looked like a path. I stepped onto the path and ventured deeper into the woods, my senses heightening with every step. I remained hyper-vigilant against potential dangers the entire way, my hand never far from my weapon, but fortunately, the silence remained unbroken. As the path ended deep within the gray-white forest, a cluster of trees bearing pale fruit came into view. I wondered if these were the specific collection items the station had to offer. Approaching one of the trees, I used my dagger to slice a stem and caught a fruit as it fell. When I brought it close to my nose, a sweet yet slightly bitter aroma wafted over, a scent unlike any fruit I'd ever encountered in my previous world. I swallowed hard, staring at it. The fragrance was so intoxicating that an inexplicable primal craving to devour it surged through me. Just as I was about to take a bite, a sudden sharp sense of danger snapped me back to reality. I hurled the fruit away instantly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stood there panting, wondering what on earth had just happened. A quick glance at my stats showed my stamina at 93, but my spirit had plummeted to 72. Cold sweat drenched my skin. My spirit had been full just moments ago, yet it had dropped drastically in the few seconds I held that fruit. I wasn't lacking food or water, so my desperation to eat a potentially poisonous object was unnatural. The rate of spirit depletion was terrifying, faster even than during a sublimation. These fruits were a trap. I took several steps back, frowning at the pale harvest. It was a nuisance that the train's appraisal function only worked on board, but I suspected the low risk of this station was tied directly to these hallucinogens. Perhaps it was only the scent that caused the lapse in judgment. After some hesitation, I decided I couldn't leave empty-handed. I needed to get them back to the train for a proper analysis. I used my dagger to rip a piece of cloth from my clothing, tying it over my nose and mouth as a makeshift mask. The old saying proved true: men die for wealth as birds die for food. Even knowing these fruits were lethal, I couldn't bring myself to abandon them. I became a diligent farmer in that eerie, silent forest, harvesting until my backpack was heavy. As I wiped the sweat from my brow, I felt thankful for my dagger. Without it, this task would have been far more difficult. Once back on the train, I immediately ran an appraisal. The system identified them as level 3 white forest fruits. In their unprocessed state, they released a hallucinogenic aroma that drained spirit, and eating them would permanently decrease one's maximum spirit. However, if processed by soaking them in cold water for 5 minutes, they would rapidly restore spirit and slightly increase hallucination resistance. I patted my chest in relief, feeling as though I'd narrowly escaped a disaster. This was a necessary wake-up call. I had thought myself cautious, but clearly I needed to be better. I eagerly dumped the harvest into the water tank. After 5 minutes, they transformed from gray-white to a brilliant pure white. I took a bite, and an explosion of incredibly sweet juice filled my mouth. It was delicious, better than any fruit I'd ever tasted. Compared to this, the biscuits and bread I'd been eating felt like cardboard. Joy sparked in my eyes as I realized the value of this find. I emptied my backpack of other supplies, grabbed my 2 guns and my dagger, and set out again. Each round trip took about 20 minutes, and filling the bag took another 10. With only 4 hours total, I had no time to waste. As I exited, I noticed the trash recycling device I'd installed was actually operating. A small cube-shaped robot, barely calf-high, was shuttling between the forest and the train, bringing back leaves and stones. It seemed pretty useless to me, but since it was already built, I let it be. I spent the next few hours as a whirlwind of activity, my dagger flashing as I stripped tree after tree. By the time the countdown reached its final 30 minutes, I had gathered over 100 pounds of fruit. It was a shame to leave, as I didn't know if I'd ever find something this delicious again, but I refused to let greed make me miss the departure. I leaned back in my seat, munching on a fruit, while I organized my stores. I had my harvest, 79 biscuits, and 21 bottles of purified water. For now, survival wasn't a concern. I opened the chat room to see how the others were faring, and the numbers immediately stopped me cold. 8,721 out of 10,000. Over 1,000 people were gone, and we were only at the second station. The messages were a chorus of misery. People dying from drinking unboiled lake water, others with punctured lungs from wild bull attacks, and many more begging for medicine or food. Modern medical luxuries were gone. Out here, a simple wound could be a death sentence. While I had used my crossroads of fate to find a safe collection zone, others were being chased by boars or trapped in toxic mud. As my own countdown neared its end, I remembered the little recycling robot. I figured if it had found 10 kilograms of wood, it would be a miracle. I walked back to the station with zero expectations, only to freeze in my tracks. Among the literal trash was a pale gray wooden box, a level 3 treasure chest. I couldn't believe my eyes. I hadn't dared venture deep into the woods for fear of getting lost, yet this little machine had wandered off and found exactly what I needed. I patted its square head with newfound appreciation, feeling a bit guilty for looking down on it. It was worth every resource I'd spent. I resisted the urge to open it immediately. A level 3 chest, if sublimated, would become level 4, guaranteeing better coins and rarer items. My stats were at 45 stamina and 92 mental energy. I gave the command to sublimate, feeling the familiar drain pull at my very soul. When it was over, I was physically spent but mentally soaring. With a creak, I opened the level 4 treasure chest. The rewards were staggering. 8 train coins, an external alert tower system, white forest fruit seeds, a gray-white paint scheme, and an advanced ceramic bulletproof vest. I marveled at the loot, knowing how envious the chat would be if they knew, though I kept the success to myself. Bragging only breeds enemies. I noticed that I couldn't sublimate these new items further. The cost was simply beyond my current total capacity. It seemed level 4 was a major threshold. I immediately installed the alert tower atop the locomotive. It was a sophisticated piece of tech that could equip ranged weapons and provide automated defense within 100 meters, even seeing through invisibility. I equipped 5 of my remaining rifles to it, feeling a massive surge in my sense of security. As for the seeds, they required special white forest soil and 30 days to mature, consuming half a kilogram of fresh water daily. It was a steep price, but I was one of the few who could afford it. In the final 3 minutes before departure, I scrambled to fill several crates with the gray soil the seeds required. I also processed the trash the robot had gathered, gaining some wood and white pigments from the leaves and stones. As the train began to move, I watched the white forest recede into the distance. I was back in the wilderness, but I was stronger than before. I stretched leisurely and noticed my private messages blinking. There was only one person on my friend list. It was Shangguan Yingshui, asking if I still needed water. I typed out a message to her, making my position clear from the start. I asked what she needed but warned her up front that I didn't have any firearms left to trade. I waited for a long time without a reply, eventually assuming she decided against the deal. Just as I was about to close the private chat, a message finally blinked onto the screen. She apologized for the delay, explaining that she had just been taking a bath. A bath? I glanced over at my own water storage tank, momentarily stunned. Just how much water did this woman have to be wasting it so lavishly? Even with my current success, I hadn't even considered being that extravagant. I told her it was no problem and asked what she wanted to trade, reminding her of my lack of guns. On the other side of the connection, inside Shangguan Yingshui's train, a black-haired girl with waist-length hair stood up from a large wooden tub that dominated most of her carriage. As she tied up her hair, her light blue eyes remained calm and unreadable. She sent over a list: 32 kilograms of wood, 50 kilograms of metal, and 40 mechanical parts. She added that she was fairly certain I had those items. I raised an eyebrow at the screen. I didn't answer directly, instead questioning why she was so sure I had them. And even if I did, why I wouldn't just use them for my own train upgrades. She replied that she simply hated trouble. She'd gathered some materials herself, but dealing with too many people took more time than she liked. She'd calculated that I was likely the only one capable of providing bulk materials right now. After all, I'd sold over 20 rifles, and aside from food and water, I had to be receiving materials in exchange. She was right, though she didn't know the half of it. I'd actually sold over 40. I had the resources she wanted, but trading them for mere water didn't interest me anymore. My reserves were sufficient for the moment, and I'd even seen people in the chat room discussing how to boil lake water to make it safe. It wasn't a method I wanted to rely on unless I was desperate, but it made raw water less valuable. Shangguan Yingshui remained silent for a while as she dried herself, then sent a screenshot that immediately changed my mind. It was a level 1 water purification device, capable of filtering wastewater at a rate of 1 kilogram per hour. I rubbed my eyes, staring at the image. Something like this actually existed? It explained her lavish bathing. She could simply filter and recycle the water. Given her willingness to trade it, I suspected she might even have the blueprint. When I asked her if she did, she didn't confirm or deny it, simply stating that the device should be enough to cover the resources she needed. I suppressed my surprise. Whatever secrets she held, I was lucky enough to be getting the tech. I agreed to the trade, and once the transaction was complete, I found the device could be perfectly installed between my wastewater and clean water tanks. Once activated, the purified water would flow automatically into storage, saving me an immense amount of trouble. Naturally, I called upon sublimation. Since it was a small level 1 item, the energy drain was minimal. It transformed into a level 2 premium water purification device, tripling the output to 3 kilograms per hour and adding the ability to purify non-freshwater sources, like seawater. Feeling a surge of goodwill, I sent her another message, asking if she could upgrade her train and if she'd be willing to share what the upgrade options looked like. I was curious to see if her choices matched mine. She hesitated but eventually sent a screenshot of her level 2 options. She had the basic carriage and the extended stop time, which were identical to mine, but her random options were a welding tool set and a wooden bed blueprint. It confirmed my theory. The carriage and time extension were fixed, while the others were random and varied in quality. Her options were noticeably inferior to the ones I'd been offered. As I was nodding in understanding, she asked if I had any train coins. I told her I didn't, and when she followed up by asking if I still wanted to buy more water, my mouth twitched. Knowing she was recycling her bath water, the idea of buying more from her felt unappealing. I declined, and the chat ended. I knew she wanted the coins to buy her own options, but I barely had enough for myself. I still had one critical choice left to make: the train burst acceleration device blueprint. It cost 5 train coins, an amount most people would take several stations to accumulate, but I had more than enough. I finalized the purchase, leaving me with 4 coins. The device required 50 kilograms of metal and 200 mechanical parts to build, and it would allow me to produce acceleration bullets that could triple the train's speed for 10 minutes. It was expensive, but undoubtedly worth the cost. The trading platform was becoming more diverse after the second station, but food and water remained the most desperate needs for the majority. Those barrels of compressed biscuits I'd looked down on were suddenly looking like a gold mine. I shook my head, glancing at the resources I'd finally managed to scrape together. It had taken 7 biscuits and a fair amount of effort to pry those mechanical parts from others. Now I understood why Shangguan Yingxue hated trading. Haggling with people and constantly adjusting prices over mere scraps of food was an exhausting waste of time. I fed the materials into the processing station, and the blueprint for the acceleration device began to emit a deep sapphire glow. Before my eyes, metal and machinery fused, coalescing into a complex mechanical heart. The system noted that the train burst acceleration device could only be installed on the main body, near the control system. Once integrated, it would produce acceleration bullets, limited to 3 uses per day. My heart sank slightly when I saw the cost. 1 kilogram of metal, 20 mechanical parts, and 1 train coin per bullet. Even the ammunition required currency. I wondered what a little sublimation would do to it. With my stamina at 55 and spirit at 70 after a few white forest fruits, I figured I had enough for 1 attempt. I poured 30 stamina and 40 spirit into the device, watching it transform into the red triple-speed train acceleration device. The maximum capacity increased to 5 bullets per day, though the potential for further sublimation was now exhausted. Following the system's prompt, I placed it near the control panel. A silvery light swallowed the device, and a sleek black loading port materialized on the console. It was a pricey investment. I spent 2 of my remaining coins to produce 2 silvery shells, each as thick as a baby's arm. I winced at the expense as I tucked my last 2 coins away. I was tempted to test the speed, but I wasn't feeling quite that extravagant yet. It was time to rest. As I drifted off, I couldn't help but wonder if the low spirit side effects were just empty threats. I hadn't felt a thing. When I finally woke, both my stamina and spirit were back to a full 100. I stretched in the warmth of the climate-controlled carriage, washing my face while humming a quiet tune. Walking to the back, I checked on the seed I'd buried in the ashen soil. It was unchanged, so I decided to see if sublimation could jumpstart its growth. It cost me 30 stamina points, but the result was a blessed white forest fruit seed. The growth cycle plummeted from 30 days to just 9 to sprout, 3 to mature. Better yet, it would produce 1 blessed fruit daily once ripe. I buried it back in the dirt and gave it some water, feeling quite satisfied. On my way back to the front, I stopped by the garbage recycling robot. I promised to upgrade the little guy, after all. I crouched down and knocked on its oversized matchbox head, calling for a sublimation. Strangely, the stamina I funneled into it simply vanished with no effect. Frowning at the first failure I'd encountered, I tried again, this time using spirit. At the cost of 40 spirit points, a familiar radiance enveloped the machine. It emerged as the GT-1 automatic treasure hunting robot. Its purpose was clear. It would automatically leave the train at stations to locate treasure chests, mapping out the ones it couldn't carry back. It would cost 1 train coin per use, and would forcibly return before the train departed. Camera-like eyes emerged from the box, rotating a full 360 degrees before locking onto my face to confirm my ID. It asked for a name, and I couldn't help but think of an old-world movie character. I named it Wally. It immediately entered sleep mode, waiting for a coin to wake up at the next station. Between the acceleration bullets and the robot, it felt like I was heading for financial ruin. I realized that most people at this stage probably didn't understand the true value of train coins yet. They were still just trying to find enough bread to see tomorrow. I quickly checked the chat room and saw I was right. People were opening chests and wondering if the coins were just some future station currency. Seizing the opportunity, I listed a trade. 1 compressed biscuit, and 1 water bottle for a single train coin. If someone took the bait, great. If not, no loss. By 12:30 p.m., the familiar Crossroads of Fate prompt appeared. I had to choose between the Level 2 Goblin Village, a hunting station, or Doomsday Town, a Level 2 mission station. To me, a mission station sounded like a new opportunity, far better than the mindless trouble of slaying goblins. I made my choice and felt the train lurch into an acceleration. The world ahead dissolved into white noise, and when the countdown hit 0, the transformation was total. I looked out at Doomsday Town. The docking countdown began its 4-hour crawl, but the system's final warning sat heavy in the air. This station wasn't just low risk anymore. It was labeled as dangerous. The train hissed to a halt, and I peered through the glass to survey my new surroundings. This station was a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness of the previous 2. Instead, a harsh sun hung high in the sky, casting a brilliant but unforgiving light over the landscape. The view was haunting. Deep red stains marred the asphalt of the streets, and rows of rusted abandoned cars choked the thoroughfares. Doomsday Town. The name was fitting. I turned to my small companion. It was time for Wally to get to work. I winced slightly as I dropped a precious train coin into its slot, watching the little bot wobble away through the recycling chute. A part of me wondered if some lurking monster might mistake it for a toy and snatch it up. But I had my own problems to worry about. Specifically, I needed to figure out the task for the station. The answer presented itself soon enough. Through the window, I spotted a corpse slumped nearby, its cold fingers still clutching a backpack. A piece of parchment tucked inside flapped rhythmically in the wind, but it was too far away to read. I did a final equipment check before heading out. I had food, water, my finely crafted rifle slung over my shoulder, and both my black gloss pistol and sharp dagger at my waist. Most importantly, I was wearing the advanced ceramic bulletproof vest I'd scavenged. I had already sublimated the armor, streamlining it from a bulky bucket-like frame into a form-fitting vest that sacrificed none of its protective integrity. Fully armed, I pressed the door release. The doors hissed open, and I stepped out, instinctively closing them behind me with a flick of my wrist. Since only the conductor could operate the doors, I didn't have to worry about unwanted guests sneaking into my home while I was away. Immediately, a wave of scorching heat rolled over me, carrying a nauseating stench, a foul mix of rotten salted fish and long-decayed bread. Approaching the body, I used the barrel of my rifle to nudge the backpack open so I could read the parchment. The note began by claiming the deceased was a great courier for the Run Company. Looking at the remains, there wasn't much greatness left, but the writer seemed to have possessed a dark sense of humor, noting that they were probably about to die, but that the courier's mission must never be broken. The task was simple: deliver the contents of the bag to a silverware shop in the southeast corner of town. The note promised a great reward from the Run Company if I showed his badge. So, this was the mission. Curious, I looked inside the bag and found a cake sealed in a transparent box, remarkably well preserved. Happy birthday was written across it in jam. Judging by the state of the body, that birthday was a long-forgotten event. I decided that while the celebration was over, the cake was still a prize worth keeping. I also found a mechanical badge featuring a gear-driven image of a running courier and a map of the town with a red dot marking my destination. Map in hand, I began my trek. The road was a graveyard of skeletons and dark red stains that whispered of old horrors. Suddenly, I spotted movement. A hyena feeding on a corpse. It was the first living creature I'd seen here, or so I thought until it turned its head. Its skull was rotted through and its heart was exposed. It wasn't a dog, it was a zombie. The creature let out a guttural growl and lunged. I told myself to stay calm, suppressed the rising panic in my chest, and raised my pistol. I pulled the trigger repeatedly. I wasn't exactly a marksman, but at that range, one bullet found its mark and the impact was powerful enough to blow the creature apart. I knew I had to move fast. The gunfire would act like a dinner bell for every monster in the vicinity. Taking a calculated detour, I managed to reach the silverware shop without further incident. To my surprise, the area was eerily quiet. I stood before the tightly closed metal shutter, wondering if there was anyone left to receive the delivery. Just as I considered prying it open, the shutter slid up just a crack. I immediately leveled my rifle at the gap. A hoarse voice from the darkness begged me not to shoot, claiming to be human. I stayed back, identified myself as a Run Company courier taking over the delivery, and showed the badge. In this wasteland, a professional title seemed to command more respect than a wandering stranger. A scruffy, bearded man in his 40s peered out, chuckling that only couriers, lunatics, and monsters were brave enough to be outside these days. He invited me in, but I kept my rifle aimed at his head. I wasn't taking any chances. I handed over the cake and demanded the reward. The man stared at the cake with a pained expression, muttering that it was a pity I hadn't come earlier. He retreated into the shop and returned with a box. Inside were 3 train coins. This confirmed my suspicion. These coins were likely the universal currency across all station worlds. But as I reached for the coins, the man's demeanor shifted instantly. He lunged forward and grabbed the barrel of my rifle with unmistakable murderous intent. I didn't hesitate. I pulled the trigger. A blast echoed, a severed hand flew, and the rolling shutter burst open. The man behind the door was no longer human. He had swollen into a grotesque monster, his face twisted in a mask of grief and rage. He screamed about his daughter just wanting a cake and cursed the useless couriers for taking too long. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and kept firing. 3 rounds hit home, but the creature's hardened hide shrugged off the upgraded rifle's power. He slammed a fist into my chest, sending me flying. I gritted my teeth and forced myself up, my stomach churning. If not for my enhanced vest, that single hit would have ended me. The monster shrieked and charged again. I fired another shot, and he laughed, claiming my bullets didn't scare him. I smirked and told him to look down. He paused, seeing his body riddled with holes he hadn't even felt. I didn't give him a second chance. I drew my blacklight enchanted pistol, which thrummed with an eerie glow. Converting my stamina into armor-piercing rounds, I stepped close and pressed the muzzle to his forehead. One final bang, and it was over. The silence returned. I realized why no other monsters were nearby. This was the big guy's territory. After catching my breath, I retrieved the cake and the 3 train coins, feeling a flicker of regret for the waste of it all. I opened the shutter fully to find a clean silverware shop filled with silver crossbow bolts and spearheads. On a shelf, I found a diary. The entries told a heartbreaking story. A father finding coins in a broken locomotive and trying to buy a birthday cake to cure his sick daughter. By March 11th, she had died without ever tasting something sweet. By March 15th, the man had lost his mind. I walked to the backyard, found the small tombstone he had erected, and placed the cake before it. It felt like the only way to truly finish the mission. But the diary left me with a chilling thought. A broken locomotive outside town? Was it a conductor who had come before us? The idea that we weren't the first survivors in this game weighed heavily on me. I scavenged what I could, a crossbow and several silver items. They were heavy, but they felt important. On my return trip, the town felt more alive with monsters, and I realized how much I needed that extra hour my upgrade provided. I saw zombie animals of all kinds, but curiously, no humanoid ones. Back at the train, I checked the time. I still had 35 minutes. I checked my haul. Mithril bolts, a mithril cross, and a mithril sword, all level 2. I recycled the scraps into 10 kilograms of raw mithril, a fortune in my old world. I decided to sublimate the cross, turning it into a level 3 sanctified mithril cross that emitted holy light. As for the other weapons, I knew my limits. I was no swordsman, and my aim with a crossbow was even worse than with a pistol. I hung the cross at the front of the train and checked the trading platform. Someone had finally accepted my offer for train coins. I sat back, munching on a fruit and admiring my new coins before opening the chat room. The numbers were grim. 7,825 out of 10,000. Another 1,000 people were gone. Most were still struggling for the barest essentials, while I was sitting on a pile of mithril and enchanted weapons. The chat room was a chaotic mess of fear and confusion as people recounted their experiences at the third station. Someone spoke of a cave crawling with spiders that they hadn't dared to enter, while another boasted of using a gun purchased from an expert to fend off wild dogs and secure a meal. My ears perked up at the mention of expert Ye. It seemed my reputation was growing, though some were quick to dismiss me. One voice insisted I was short-sighted and that his big brother Li Shaosheng was the true authority, claiming Li was on the verge of a level 2 upgrade. I remembered Li Shaosheng. He had confidently predicted he'd reach level 2 within 3 stations, and yet here we were at the 3rd, and he was only just announcing his success. He posted a screenshot of his upgrade options, inviting others to join his alliance if they had train coins, promising food and water to early recruits. I ignored his posturing and focused on the data. His options included a carriage blueprint, an automatic fishing rod, a survival rations recipe, and the 1-hour stop extension. As I suspected, the first and fourth options were identical to mine. The pattern was clear. While the rations were useless to me, the fishing rod was an interesting prospect for future water-based stations, though I felt no need to rush into buying it. With the Crossroads of Fate module, I'd have a 30-minute head start on information anyway. It was time to consider another train sublimation. I had been holding off to recover my stamina and accumulate more train coins. Between the silverware shop's bounty and my previous holdings, I had 4 coins. If Wally found a chest here, I'd be in an even stronger position. Just as I prepared to begin, the rhythmic clanking of treads outside caught my attention. I looked out to see Wally wobbling back through the recycling chute, clutching a candy box stained with dark red marks. The little robot was covered in deep bite marks, clearly the work of something far more vicious than a normal animal. I followed its trail with my eyes and saw dozens of zombie dogs circling the train, followed by lumbering, mutated humanoids similar to the shop owner I'd killed. I gave Wally's metal head a helpless rap, noting that it had led the monsters straight to my door. Still, it had brought back a level 2 treasure chest, so I couldn't be too angry. I picked up the box, completely unconcerned by the growing horde outside. This was only a level 2 station, and my train was equipped with a level 4 defensive sentry tower. As the monsters crossed the 100-meter perimeter, the red orb atop the tower locked on. Crimson circles painted the ground beneath their feet, and long rifle barrels extended from the shadows. The air filled with the steady crack of gunfire, each shot finding a lethal weak point. In less than 10 seconds, the clearing was littered with corpses. I watched the scene with a detached calm, munching on a white forest fruit as more monsters swarmed in, only to have their skulls shattered by the sentry's superior marksmanship. When the countdown hit 0, the train lurched forward. We slipped into the void, leaving the ruins of Doomsday Town behind for the familiar endless wilderness. The onboard broadcast chimed, announcing that the Newbie Protection period was over. Survival mode was now active, and the voice warned us to be cautious at night. Any train moving slower than 30 kilometers per h would enter a dangerous status. The chat room erupted in a fresh wave of panic, but I was focused on my own notifications. I had achieved an A-grade elimination rating for the station and completed a hidden mission, Town Liberator. My reward was a car exchange ticket. I patted Wally's head, realizing I would have missed this entirely without the little bot's mistake. I decided to sublimate the ticket first, transforming it into a special car exchange prize ticket for a level 2 special car. Upon activation, a basic storage car descended from the sky and locked onto my train. It was exactly what I needed, 48 units that could store unlimited quantities of items, finally clearing the clutter from my living quarters. But I wasn't done. I moved to the end of the new car and initiated another sublimation to push it to level 3. The cost was heavy, 25 stamina and 25 mental energy, plunging me back into exhaustion. However, the result was a storage unit car that not only prevented items from decaying, but offered 3 special units accessible from anywhere. It was essentially a portable inventory. I tested it by placing fruits into a unit and successfully manifesting one in my hand back in the locomotive. It was an incredible gain. Exhaustion tugged at me, but I still had the level 2 chest Wally had found. Pushing through the haze, I spent another 45 mental energy points to sublimate it into a level 3 chest. The warnings for mental collapse flashed red in my vision, but I felt nothing but a heavy, numbing fatigue. I pried the box open to find 6 train coins, a zombie slayer chainsaw sword, 3 virus serums, and a windproof lighter. With 10 train coins now in my possession, I was likely the wealthiest conductor in existence. I had the resources to claim every upgrade option the next time the train leveled up. But for now, my body was screaming for rest. I had pushed myself to the absolute limit, reaching a state of exhaustion I'd never known before. While I slept, the rest of the world scrambled. Conductors were desperately trading for metal and parts to upgrade their wheels just to hit the 30 km/h safety threshold, even if it meant sabotaging their long-term progress. Meanwhile, Li Xiaosheng sat in his carriage with a darkened expression. He had a resource radar ability that let him pinpoint materials, yet somehow, someone was still faster than him. The sharp, rhythmic cracks of gunfire suddenly tore through the silence of the wilderness. So noisy, I forced my leaden eyelids open and instinctively glanced out the window, only to feel my heart skip a beat. Dozens of glowing crimson eyes were cutting through the pitch-black night, relentlessly chasing the train. The sheer terror of the sight snapped me wide awake in an instant. I scrambled to the front of the locomotive, finding that my automated alert system had already hummed to life, its red sensors swiveling. I suddenly recalled the grim announcement that followed the third station. This had to be the nighttime danger they warned us about. The system identified the pursuers as level 1 Blood Moon wolves, noting their chasing speed at 25 km/h. Upon seeing that, I felt the tension in my chest loosen slightly. As long as the train maintained a speed above 30 km/h, I wasn't technically in danger of being overtaken, and since my level 2 train cruised at 40 km/h, these beasts had no real hope of catching me. I splashed some freezing water on my face, letting the biting wind from the vents clear the last of the fog from my brain. It was 1:44 a.m., and any lingering sleepiness was gone. I opened the chat room to check on the others, but as I saw the numbers, my pupils contracted in shock. 4,130 out of 10,000. I vaguely remembered the count being around 7 or 8,000 earlier that day. That meant over 4,000 people had been slaughtered in the wilderness while I slept, and the number was still ticking down. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down my spine. The nighttime was far deadlier than the stations. Anyone who hadn't managed to upgrade their speed was essentially served up as prey. Only those who survived this night of terror could truly call themselves survivors, and it was clear that the days of hiding inside the train were over. To live, we had to explore, harvest, and upgrade, or die. A notification blinked in my private chat. It was Shangguan Yingshui, asking if I was still alive. I told her I'd just woken up and asked if she wanted to trade. She was looking for bullets, but I had to turn her down. Between the third station massacre and the alert tower's active defense, I'd burned through over 70 rounds. I only had about 300 left, and I couldn't risk selling my own security. She asked if I had a bullet blueprint, and when I told her I didn't, she offered a characteristically decisive goodbye. Our exchange was refreshingly simple. I sat back and checked my personal stats, noticing something impossible. My spirit had recovered to 110. I rubbed my eyes and even pinched myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming, but the sting was real. My spirit cap had actually increased. I couldn't recall doing anything special before bed other than total exhaustion, but I pushed the confusion aside for now. An increased cap was a gift, and I wasn't going to question it. It was time. Having cleared 3 stations, the train was ready for its next sublimation. I touched the control panel and felt the floodgates open as my stamina and spirit began to drain rapidly. While the first upgrade was cheap, this one was a massive draw. My stamina dropped to 52 and my spirit to 50, but the notification confirmed the success. The train was now level 3. I glanced at the requirements for level 4 and felt a headache coming on. 300 kilograms of wood, 300 mechanical parts, 450 kilograms of metal, and exotic items like gold mithril, and something called a firestone. I turned my attention to the immediate rewards. My speed had jumped to 60 kilometers per h, and the chassis, wheels, and frame were now level 3. But the real prizes were the upgrade options and the record-breaking module card I'd just earned. I opened the options: a conductor module card for early departure, a level 3 bullet blueprint, and a level 3 power generator blueprint. It was perfect timing. I desperately needed bullets and the generator would be vital later. Even with my 10 coins, I couldn't afford everything, so I had to be strategic. I spent 8 coins on the early departure privilege, the bullet blueprint, and the extra docking time. The bullet blueprint required metal and gunpowder, but since gunpowder was scarce on the trading platform, I decided to wait on manufacturing. Instead, I focused on the early departure module. I immediately sublimated it, turning it into the VIP early departure privilege, which allowed me to leave any station whenever the docking clock hit the final 3 hours. Finally, I looked at the new conductor module card. It was blood red with an abstract eye pattern, looking far more ominous than the previous cards. However, I was running on fumes. The constant cycle of survival and sublimation had left me in a state of perpetual fatigue. I decided to hold on to the card and let sleep take me once more. While I slept, the chat was a graveyard of desperate pleas. People were realizing that 30 kilometers per h was barely enough, and that the monsters were only getting faster. By 6:30 a.m., a new broadcast chilled everyone to the bone. The second night of survival would begin in 3 days, and anyone below 40 kilometers per h would be in danger. This meant a level 2 upgrade was now mandatory for survival. Li Xiaosheng watched the panic with a smug grin. With his resource radar talent, he felt untouchable, and he used the chaos to grow his alliance, promising to help others upgrade. He wondered if I was the one who beat him to the first upgrade and sent me a friend request, arrogantly assuming I'd jump at the chance to join him. I woke up at 8:34 a.m., feeling the ache of a night spent on the floor. I ate a white forest fruit, tended to my sapling, and checked the time. The 40 kilometers per h requirement didn't bother me, but the weather did. The sky was choked with oppressive dark clouds that seemed to weigh down on the world. I took the red conductor module card in my hand. My stamina was at 82 and my mental energy at 110. It was time. I activated my talent and whispered the command to sublimate. The card transformed into an advanced conductor module, Judgment of Gunfire. As the energy settled, a strange new clarity flooded my mind. I drew my pistol and the usual weight and clumsiness were gone. I felt like a master marksman who had spent decades on the range. The module allowed me to consume mental energy to judge a target, dealing damage based on their sins. I knew then that every shot I fired from now on would hit exactly where I wanted it to. Directly receiving the skills of a sharpshooter changed everything. With this newfound mastery, I felt that if I encountered those zombie monsters again, there would be no need for the frantic hiding and dodging of the past. After digesting my rewards, I idly munched on some fruit while opening the private chat interface. Given my growing reputation among the survivors, I expected someone might proactively seek me out for trades. It would be a shame to miss out on potential blueprints or train coins. I spotted a familiar name, Li Xiaosheng, the 3-station guy. He was inviting me to join an alliance, but the idea felt incredibly unreliable to me. After a moment of hesitation, I accepted his friend request anyway. Though we weren't cut from the same cloth, I figured he likely had some train coins, and trading with him was fine as long as I didn't get too involved. On the other side, Li Xiaosheng was busy competing for fishing rod sales when he noticed I had accepted. He seemed to think I had finally decided to reach out to him out of necessity. I cut straight to the point, asking if he was finished making those fishing rods. He dodged the question at first, asking if I'd completed my demand for the price. He offered to give me one for free, provided I joined his alliance. The terms were a contribution of 5 kilos of wood or 1 train coin in exchange for daily rations and a rod. He went on a long-winded tangent about how my supplies would eventually run out and how we should arm his members to become the strongest faction. I calmly finished my fruit while reading his pitch before typing back a simple ultimatum. Was he selling the rods or not? Li Xiaosheng wasn't the only source. Someone else had found a mechanical fishing rod blueprint at the first station, and when Li stopped responding, I didn't waste time waiting. I found the other seller, a man named Zhao Lin, and the transaction was refreshingly quick. For 20 mechanical parts and a single biscuit, I acquired a mechanical fishing rod that was fully automated, miles better than a wooden one. I immediately initiated a sublimation, transforming it into a basic alluring mechanical fishing rod that required no bait and was far more effective at attracting fish. As I set it aside, I noticed Zhao Lin had sent me a friend request, which I accepted. At 12:30 p.m., a thunderous roar split the gloomy sky. From the comfort of my climate-controlled carriage, I watched oppressive black clouds choke the atmosphere. A single raindrop was quickly followed by a torrential downpour. The announcement system crackled to life, declaring a thunderstorm day and warning us that the next station would likely share these conditions. It was strange to think the wasteland's weather could affect the stations. which felt like entirely different worlds. I checked my crossroads of fate for the 4th station. My options were the level 3 Thunderstrike Goblin Tribe, a hunting station, or the level 3 Mistvale Manor, a mission station. The levels were rising, and the recurring presence of goblins made me feel like I had some bizarre connection to them. However, I had no intention of entering a hunting station that reeked of danger. I chose the manor, even though the last mission station, Doomsday Town, had been fraught with peril. The train accelerated and space dissolved as darkness and thunder swallowed the locomotive. When we arrived, the docking countdown began at 5 hours, accompanied by a heavy warning: hazardous. Through the window, I saw we were on a broken mountain highway in a relentless storm. Lightning illuminated a police car billowing smoke nearby, surrounded by uniformed corpses. I hoped I wasn't facing zombies again, but I prepared for the worst. I activated Wally, inserting one of my last 2 train coins, and watched the little machine wobble out into the rain. I made my final preparations, checking my special storage units for fruits, bullets, and my blessed virus serums, which now acted as powerful health potions. Armed with my pistol, rifle, dagger, vest, and the mithril cross, and clad in a traded raincoat, I stepped out into the storm. I searched the wrecked police car and the nearby corpses. They weren't turning, which was a relief. Beside one officer, I found a voice recorder. The recording mentioned a tycoon named Ravi who had died at Rainvale Villa on Davil Mountain. The police seemed reluctant to investigate the remote location, but were motivated by the tycoon's daughter and her potential funding. They even discussed pinning the murder on a maid if they couldn't find the real killer. It seemed like a surface-level mission. I found 2 pistols and some low-grade ammo in the car, which I tossed back into the train, since they were of little use to me. Taking the police chief's identification and badge, I headed up the winding road. In 15 minutes, I reached the iron gates of a massive black estate. A nervous guard rushed over, and my disguised identity was enough to convince him to let me in. He begged me to find the real killer, insisting the maid was responsible for his master's death. The guard explained that Ravi had died 4 nights ago, but they couldn't call for help until 3 days ago due to the storm. It sounded like a classic locked room mystery, but I struggled to believe a level 3 station would be so mundane. As we approached the castle, a shrill scream echoed from above. A female corpse plummeted through the air and crashed into the lawn. In the flash of lightning, I saw a shadow that definitely wasn't human, and the mithril cross on my chest began to emit heat. The guard screamed that the maid was dead. An elderly butler ran out, and the terrified guard fled into the night, accusing the old man of being the killer. The butler sighed, calling me chief and noting how young I looked. He picked up the maid's body and tossed it into one of 5 pre-dug graves on the lawn, 3 of which were already occupied. He invited me inside, and the sensation of being watched made my skin crawl. Inside, I asked for hot water and pressed him for the truth. The butler explained that after the master died 4 days ago, the children had argued. The daughter was found dead the next morning, which drove the guard mad. On the 3rd day, the young master died too. He admitted he expected to die soon as well, which is why he had dug all 5 graves. He warned me that the estate was cursed and that I should leave, but his bloodshot eyes under the candlelight were unsettling. The mystery had clearly turned supernatural. I gripped my cross, knowing I'd have left already if I didn't have it. I asked why he was still there, and he gave a mournful smile explaining that he couldn't leave. The gates wouldn't let him pass. He had told the guard not to let me in, but it was too late now. He apologized, adding that if I found myself unable to leave either, he would dig a grave for me too. What do you mean by this curse you mentioned? The old butler stood momentarily stunned, his gaze fixed on my face. Despite my youth, he clearly saw no trace of the fear he expected. He asked me, almost in disbelief, if I wasn't afraid. I simply stood up, my eyes tracking the solid wood stairs that spiraled into the upper reaches of the castle. I told him that I'd forgotten to mention a small detail. Besides being a police chief, I also work part-time as a priest. Since things had reached this point, I explained that I wouldn't be leaving easily. To prove my point, I pulled the mithril sanctuary cross from my chest pocket. A gentle holy light immediately surged forth, dispelling the surrounding gloom and casting me in a glow that made me look like the spokesperson of a deity. The old man's mouth dropped open. He rubbed his eyes hard, staring at me as if I were a miracle. It took him a long moment to regain his senses, even after the light faded and I cleared my throat to get his attention. He finally gasped out a plea to the heavens, declaring that they were saved. With my new identity as a part-time priest firmly established, the old butler wasted no time in spilling the manor's dark history. It turned out the original owner was a bloodthirsty madman. He had once used his own maid as a scapegoat for his crimes, throwing her to a corrupt police chief who tortured and eventually executed her. Following her death, the manor was swallowed by an eternal storm of thunder and rain. When it finally cleared, every soul inside, including the treacherous police chief, had died an unnatural death. Over the next 30 years, the manor changed hands a dozen times, and every owner met a violent end on a rainy night. Ravi, the current owner, had been a miser who didn't believe in ghosts. He saw a tax-free mansion at a bargain price, and couldn't resist. Now the cycle was repeating. The rain, the isolation, and the deaths. The butler noted that the only difference this time was that they'd successfully reached me, hoping I could finally break the curse. I asked him where the first mate had died, and he pointed toward the clock tower at the highest point of the castle. I already knew my path. This curse was likely a restless spirit bound to the stone and soil, and as long as my cross could overpower it, the mission was as good as solved. I didn't dwell on the possibility of failure. That kind of thinking was pointless. I took an oil lamp and followed the butler up the stairs. The castle was a symphony of cold, damp echoes and the rhythmic dripping of leaks, but when we reached the clock tower, the cross in my palm began to pulse with a sudden intense heat. I knew we had arrived. The butler stayed back, paralyzed by fear, so I gritted my teeth and stepped into the tower alone. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt something lock onto me, rushing through the air at high speed. I didn't panic. I simply told it to get lost as the mithril sanctuary cross unleashed a blinding soft light. A piercing scream shattered the night, followed by the metallic clang of something hitting the floor. I looked down to see a smooth, translucent skull resting at my feet. I blinked, wondering if that was really it. I pinched my thigh to make sure I wasn't dreaming, but the pain was real. I searched the room, finding nothing else. It was over, just like that. Looking at the cross, I realized I'd probably underestimated its power. For anyone else, this station would have been a death trap. But my ability to sublimate the level 2 mithril cross into this sanctuary version had given me a weapon the world hadn't prepared for. I exhaled deeply, picking up the skull. Even if I didn't know its purpose yet, I wasn't about to leave a level 3 drop behind. When I emerged, the butler was nearly white with ghost-pale terror, but I reassured him that the curse was lifted and showed him the skull as proof. He stammered out his gratitude, though the thunderstorm outside continued unabated. I knew the spirit hadn't caused the storm. The storm had likely birthed the spirit. Since the manor seal was gone and I'd only been here for an hour, I decided to make the most of my time. This was a wealthy man's home, and while there weren't trained coins or weapons lying around, it had something far more vital. Real food. I was tired of biscuits and fruit. I wanted a real meal. The butler led me to a safe and presented a pure red gemstone, a priceless treasure Ravi had found in his youth. He insisted I take it as a reward, adding that since the master was gone, I was free to take anything else I liked. That was music to my ears. I weighed the cool, smooth gem in my hand and told him I'd be heading down the mountain soon. But first, I needed to restock my supplies. I raided the kitchen, finding a fridge full of fresh meat, eggs, and vegetables. I began making round trips to the train every 20 minutes, hauling back as much as I could carry. The butler, busy tying up the crazed security guard, looked startled when I reappeared for the third time. He asked if there was a problem with the curse, and I casually told him that the almighty god was just hungry. On my final trip, the butler called out to me at the iron gate. He and the guard bowed deeply, and he handed me a ribbon-tied wooden box. He explained that he didn't care if I emptied the house, but he would have regretted letting me leave without this. Inside were 3 train coins. He mentioned they were currency for the Run Company, a name that sent a jolt through me, so the organization from Doomsday Town wasn't just a one-off. I couldn't solve that mystery yet, so I returned to the train for the last time. I ditched my raincoat and looked at my pile of fresh food and kitchenware with a grin. I stored everything in the storage units to prevent spoilage and immediately fired up a grill for a thick premium steak. As it sizzled, I set out containers to catch rainwater and organize my haul. The skull had become a purified earthbound object, a level 3 item that could ward off evil, and the ruby was a level 1 valuable. I decided to sublimate the skull immediately, feeling my stamina and spirit drain away until I was nearly empty. The skull transformed into a perfectly smooth glowing jade stone, a level 4 pure earthbound stone. This thing was a powerhouse. It nullified all evil spirits below its level and absorbed negative effects meant for me. It still had potential for more, but that was a task for another day. With 42 minutes left on the clock, I was enjoying my steak when I heard a familiar wobble. Wally emerged from the recycling chute with a blood-stained gift box. A level 3 treasure chest. I patted his head and promised him some oil later, before he went back to hibernate. There was no reason to stay any longer. I commanded the train to depart. As we accelerated through the void and back into the wilderness, the station chat room erupted. People were losing their minds over the news that monsters would now attack during the day, and that the Newbie Protection was gone. I ignored the chatter about whether anyone had actually reached level 3 yet. Let them eat their words later. The death toll for Station 4 was lower, with only about 1,000 deaths, but the desperation in the chat was palpable. I focused on the level 3 chest, using my remaining energy to sublimate it into level 4. I speared a piece of steak and wiped my hands, waiting for the lid to open. My last level 4 chest had given me the watchtower. I could only hope this one was just as good. The familiar notification chimed as the level 4 treasure chest yielded its contents. Along with 8 train coins, I found an observer blueprint, a safety bracelet, and a wind-up monkey doll bomb blueprint. All level 4 alongside a mysterious item called a profane card fragment. Seeing 2 level 4 blueprints in a single haul was a stroke of luck that far surpassed my previous openings. I eagerly examined the new acquisitions. The observer blueprint required a mix of metal, wood, mechanical parts, and electronic components. Once installed, it would act as a comprehensive security system, monitoring every inch of the train and sounding an alarm the moment a foreign presence was detected. It was an excellent facility, though I'd need to scour the trading platform for those electronic components. The safety bracelet was even more straightforward, but perhaps more vital. Its brief description promised to block a single fatal attack before shattering. In this world, survival is the only currency that truly matters. And as I slid the bracelet onto my right wrist, an inexplicable sense of security washed over me. The monkey doll bomb, however, presented a logistical hurdle. It required a significant amount of gunpowder, 400 grams per unit. Considering 100 bullets only used 500 grams total, the cost was steep. Shaking my head at the frustration of having blueprints without materials, I realized I'd have to take matters into my own hands and purchase what I needed. My focus then shifted to the black and gold shard. It was only 1/3 of a whole, labeled as a profane card fragment. The system indicated I needed 3 to synthesize the full card, though the ultimate function remained a mystery. It clearly wasn't something ordinary, and obtaining 2 more fragments would likely require finding more level 4 chests. A daunting task even with my luck. Turning to the trading platform, I found the market as chaotic as ever. Small quantities and inconsistent, predatory pricing were the norm, and I had no intention of being taken for a fool just because I was wealthy. Truly capable survivors were no longer just giving away essentials like gunpowder. If I wanted results, I had to speak to the masses directly. I spent a train coin to pin a message in the public chat, offering a choice of a compressed biscuit and water or a fresh tomato for every 200 grams of gunpowder. I posted a similar request for electronic components, offering a bottle of water and a biscuit for every 10. While most people likely had water after the thunderstorm platform, my offer included the comfort of sweetness and the luxury of fresh produce. I had hauled 3 crates of tomatoes from the 4th station's manor. Like ancient sailors, we were essentially on a long voyage where scurvy was a very real threat. The chat exploded immediately. Some were awestruck by the pinned message, others were scandalized that I'd spend a whole train coin just for visibility, and many were salivating over the mention of tomatoes. As I suspected, there were prepared individuals among the survivors. Within a short time, I completed 10 trades, securing 2 kilograms of gunpowder. I immediately went to work manufacturing my first batch of level 3 bullets. They felt heavier and more significant than the low-level rounds I'd started with. To test them, I fired a single shot from my black gloss pistol at a stack of metal scrap. Where my old rounds would have simply pierced the target, this one blew the entire stack apart. I couldn't help but marvel at the sheer intensity of the power increase. I quickly processed the rest of the gunpowder and stored 999 level 3 bullets in my special storage unit, ensuring I could access them even when away from the train. Soon, my private messages began to flicker. All 3 of my contacts had reached out. Li Shaosheng was busy with his usual delusions of grandeur, suggesting we join forces to become the kings of conductors. I ignored him. Zhao Lin, the fishing rod seller, was looking to buy a gun with train coins, a partner worth keeping. Then there was Shangguan Yingshui. She asked about my train level, and I gave her a vague answer, simply stating I had just upgraded. She didn't press for details, but her interest soon shifted to my newly acquired gunpowder. She wanted to buy bullets. Knowing she was one of the few who could actually afford a decent price, I offered her 40 bullets for 1 train coin, a middle ground price that she reluctantly accepted after some haggling. I didn't stop there. I offered to sell her a level 2 exquisite sharpshooter rifle for 2 train coins, throwing in 10 extra bullets to sweeten the deal. She gritted her teeth and agreed, likely feeling as though I knew exactly how many coins she had in her pocket. As a final request, I asked her to use her blueprint to craft me a wooden bed, providing the materials myself. That trade was a massive win. I walked away with 3 more train coins and a proper place to sleep. The rifle was useless to me anyway. With my judgment of gunfire module, my handgun was more than enough for long-range targets. I then turned to Zhao Lin and sold him several sublimated level 2 rifles for 2 coins each, and even traded some bullets for 5 freshwater fish. My wealth had grown to 16 train coins. After acquiring the necessary electronic components, I built the observer device in the 3rd car. I also finally purchased the energy-powered generator blueprint for 6 coins. The materials were manageable, and once built, the generator ran on diesel. However, I wasn't about to hunt for oil, so I patted the machine and initiated a sublimation. It transformed into an enchanted omnivorous power generator, capable of burning wood, metal, or coal to produce electricity. I tossed in a piece of wood, watched the battery level rise, and finally installed some electric bulbs. For the first time since arriving in this world, I lay in a real bed under the glow of electric light. The thunderstorm had passed, leaving the wilderness night lonely but quiet. I counted the darkness until I drifted off. The next morning, dazzling sunlight woke me. I stretched, enjoyed a white forest fruit for breakfast, and headed to the front cabin. The moment I stepped inside, a wall of stifling heat hit me like a physical blow. The morning broadcast confirmed my fears. We had entered a hot wind day. The weather was shifting again, and though it didn't mention a platform change, the temperature was already becoming dangerous. I retreated to the temperature-controlled car to wash my face, dreading the heat. It was a nuisance that the control system was only accessible in the sweltering front cabin, but I had no choice. I logged back into the chat room, finding it already bustling with the voices of survivors who had been forced awake long before I was. In this heat, it seemed I was the only one who had managed to sleep in. The air inside the carriage was stifling, almost like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I wiped the stinging sweat from my forehead and gulped down an entire bottle of mineral water, trying to ignore the frantic messages scrolling across the chat interface. People were losing their minds, screaming about the 40-degree heat and the way the train had transformed into a literal metal oven. They talked about their mental and physical attributes dropping continuously, driven to the brink of insanity by the sun's relentless beating. I checked my own interface and noted that while my physical stats were indeed dipping to 98, my mental state remained a steady 110. It made me wonder if my constant consumption of white forest fruits had granted me a resilience others lacked. A sudden, sharp report of a gunshot cut through my thoughts. I looked toward the source and realized the warning device had already engaged. Outside, a pack of emaciated hyenas was desperately chasing the train, their rib cages visible under mangy fur. At my current level 3 speed, they posed no real threat, but it troubled me that there had been no system broadcast for this encounter. It wasn't a timed event like the night survival. It was a random, spontaneous pursuit. This, I realized, was likely the new normal of the wilderness. A flicker on my private chat caught my eye. It was Zhao Lin, the maker of the automatic fishing rods. She asked if I had encountered monsters too, and I confirmed I had, watching the hyenas finally fall behind in the distance. She sounded shaken, mentioning that a swarm of birds had nearly shattered her windows and that she'd barely survived by pushing her train to 35 kilometers per h. She was desperate for upgrade materials but had run out of train coins, asking if I would accept fish as payment. I looked at the message and felt a twinge of cold pragmatism. I wasn't short on food, and I had no interest in running a charity. I rejected her offer immediately. But she didn't give up. She pleaded with me, revealing that she possessed a talent called luck conservation, a cycle of alternating good and bad fortune. She had struck it rich at a fish pond station, but she was terrified that her next stop would be a disaster, leaving her unable to upgrade before the next night's survival. Her talent was certainly unique, though I much preferred the reliable power of my sublimation. Still, I saw the potential for a long-term investment. I asked what she needed and she listed 38 kilograms of wood, 22 kilograms of metal, and 14 mechanical parts. I told her I wanted the contents of her last treasure chest plus 10 fish, and specifically warned her not to try and offload that fishing rod blueprint on me. She agreed instantly, and in a flash of light the trade was complete. Among the items she sent was a level 1 plant nutrient solution. While the waterproof boots and fishing line were mediocre, the solution was exactly what I needed. I immediately sublimated it twice, watching it transform from a basic liquid into a blessed plant elixir. I hurried to the rear of the temperature-controlled carriage and poured the glowing elixir into the wooden box of my white forestry. The transformation was breathtaking. A milky white glow erupted, and the sapling shot toward the ceiling in seconds, its branches heavy with fruit. When the light faded, I had a level 4 blessed white forest tree that produced 3 fruits daily. More importantly, the fruits themselves were now level 4, meaning they could be eaten without the tedious 5-minute water soak. I took a bite, savoring the rich sweetness, and realized I now had 55 life-saving fruits stored in my special compartments. As the hours passed, I lounged in my 22°C sanctuary, enjoying a steak and a beer while the rest of the world sweltered. My only complaint was that the beer was warm. A fridge was definitely next on my list. 30 minutes before reaching the 5th stop, the Crossroads of Fate appeared. To my surprise, both options were level 4, the Abyssal Bat Cave, a combat stop, or Mystic Belltown, a mission stop. The combat label gave me pause. At level 4, my equipment advantage might not be enough to carry me through a direct confrontation. I decided to stick with what I knew and chose the mission station. As the train accelerated into the void, the sun vanished, replaced by a quiet, snowy night. We pulled into what looked like an utterly ordinary train station. Following my routine, I activated Wally with a train coin and watched him wobble away. Just as I prepared to step off, the sound of approaching footsteps reached me. I drew my pistol, my judgment of gunfire module already calculating the trajectory based on the sound. Then, a girl's voice called out, clear and innocent. She called me Inspector and sounded relieved that I had finally arrived. I hesitated but opened the door, trusting that my defensive items would react if she were a threat. Standing on the platform was a petite girl of about 11 or 12, bundled in a white winter coat. She peered into the train with azure eyes and waved enthusiastically, claiming that a sister nun had promised a chief inspector would come to save them. I looked at her, searching for the catch. I asked her what her name was, and she answered with a bright childlike smile that her name was Tina. It seemed my 5th mission had begun before I even stepped off the platform. Would you like me to follow Tina and see what she expects an inspector to do for the town? Tina blinked at me, her eyes filled with a plea so tangible it felt like a weight in the air. She asked if I was truly the inspector everyone had been waiting for, and I couldn't help but offer her a kind smile as I nodded. I reasoned that since she claimed the person arriving by train would be the inspector, and I was the only one here, it had to be me. She let out a joyful cheer and urged me to follow her quickly, but I asked her to wait a moment. I reached into my supplies and handed her an ordinary white forest fruit. The little girl took it without a trace of fear, and as she bit into it, she marveled at the sweetness. I just smiled, checking my gear one last time and donning the sanctuary cross before finally stepping onto the platform. After sealing the door and setting my warning tower to maximum sensitivity, I told the girl to lead the way to these people she mentioned. We left the unnaturally sterile station and entered a town dusted with a light, silent snow. There were no streetlights. The only beacon was a single lantern hanging above a church that looked uncannily like an upright train cab. The silence was heavy, and I could feel unseen eyes tracking our movement from the shadows. Whispers skittered through the dark, sending a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I kept one hand on my black gloss pistol and the other near my cross, acutely aware that this station carried a danger rating far more severe than the others. Tina, however, skipped along, the only splash of color in a grayscale world, seemingly untouched by the oppressive atmosphere. When we reached the church, Tina beckoned me inside, announcing that everyone had been waiting forever. I hesitated at the base of the jade-white steps before telling her to go in first. As she pushed the doors open, a flood of light revealed hundreds of townspeople seated in pews, their heads bowed in deep prayer. At the front stood a golden-haired nun dressed in black clutching a dark book. Tina announced my arrival, and the church fell into a sudden vacuum-like silence. Then, as if they were puppets controlled by the same string, every head lifted in unison, and hundreds of eyes locked onto me. I didn't flinch, already having the safety off on my pistol. I knew that the slightest move would result in a bullet for the nun. She smiled warmly, telling the people not to frighten me and sending Tina to prepare something. As the prayers resumed, the nun approached me with a box retrieved from the pulpit. I leveled my gun at her head and told her to stay back, demanding to know what was really happening. This place was wrong on every level, and her apparent normality only made it more unsettling. She stopped, but knelt to place the box on the floor. Inside was a black and gold shard, a fragment of a blasphemy card. The nun prayed before the card, her smile never wavering as she told me that only those who blaspheme against gods can enter this world. She called me the inspector, but then corrected herself, calling me a blasphemer or a conductor. She asked me which stop this town was for me, and though my cross didn't react to her, I knew I had to get out. I gave a cold laugh, told her only a fool wouldn't run, and bolted back toward the station. She shouted for the townspeople to stop me, and the praying residents transformed into sprinting hunters with impossible speed. I realized then that this stop was going to be a nightmare. I fired a headshot at the lead pursuer, but the nun's voice echoed through the town, mocking my efforts. She claimed my bullets were useless against her creations, and that a novice like me couldn't hope to win. Her triumph turned to shock, however, when she felt her connection to the puppet sever. My level 3 armor-piercing rounds were doing what ordinary bullets couldn't. With my judgment of gunfire module, my aim was effortless. I was picking them off, creating distance, and it looked like I might actually make it back to the train. Then, with a soft sigh that chilled me to the bone, the nun appeared directly in my path, less than 100 meters from the station. She had teleported as if she had always been standing there. She admitted her surprise that a level 3 train could defeat her puppets, just as my warning tower hummed to life. Before it could fire, black chains lashed out and bound the barrels. Seeing my defense so easily neutralized, I realized I was outmatched. I tried to play it off, suggesting she just take what she wanted without the hostility, but she assured me she wasn't there to hurt me. I helplessly sat on the ground, acknowledging that I couldn't run from a woman who controlled chains and space itself. She introduced herself as Shea and pulled me to my feet, her slender, elegant figure contrasting with the terrifying power she had just displayed. Back inside the church, she shoved the blasphemy card fragment into my hands. I tried to decline such a precious item, sensing the danger attached to it, but she just laughed it off, asking how a kind-hearted nun could possibly harm anyone. My skepticism grew when she casually crushed the skull of one of her puppets, a head that had required my best ammo to penetrate, with her bare hand. I quickly promised her I wouldn't throw the card away. Shea then asked me what my talent was, and though I remained silent, she claimed she wasn't curious. She was a strange woman, alternating between holy grace and erratic frustration. She grew annoyed when I didn't ask her questions, teleporting in front of me and crushing another puppet's skull, just to make a point. I hurriedly rattled off a string of questions to satisfy her, but she just covered my mouth, telling me to pick one. She eventually sat cross-legged on a bench and revealed that she was a senior of sorts, having arrived in this world 20 years ago. She explained that she had been sealed here by someone who erased the station from the records, making it impossible for high-level trains to find her. Only a low-level train like mine could enter, but it shouldn't have been able to reach this platform. She deduced that my talent was the reason I had found her, and she warned me never to reveal my abilities or the blasphemy card to anyone. She told me that if others found out, they would come for my life, and I'd end up trapped just like her. I stared at the card in my hand, desperately wishing she would take it back. It felt like a death sentence, but looking into Shea's eyes, I knew I was stuck with it. I looked at her and asked directly, Shea, were you among the first batch of survivors to arrive in this world? Since it seemed she didn't actually intend to kill me, the paralyzing fear I felt earlier began to ebb away. I decided I might as well be bold and clarify the things I needed to know. After all, a senior who had been here for over 20 years had to possess knowledge far beyond my own. She shook her head, explaining that there were quite a few batches of survivors before her time, though she noted that we rarely encounter them. When I asked why, she snapped her fingers, and several black chains materialized in the air, assembling themselves into a spectral train track. She reminded me that the world we were in is infinite and that all stations represent different worlds. In her era, there was a powerful man who wanted to measure the vastness of the wilderness. He united the strongest conductors of that age to gather resources and boosted his train's speed to levels even she found hard to imagine. Shea clicked her tongue as if recalling a terrifying number. She mentioned that the man had a module, asking if I knew about them yet, and explained that her chains were a module as well. She described them as magic or sci-fi weapons, the best way for a conductor to enhance their power. However, she looked at me and noted that as a level 3 conductor, obtaining modules wouldn't be easy, as they usually only appear in level 5 plus treasure chests, or after specific upgrades. Then, she gave me a scrutinizing gaze asking if I had already obtained a module from my upgrade options, since I had shot so accurately earlier. I could only chuckle sheepishly in response. I had indeed obtained a module, but it wasn't for marksmanship. It was the early departure privilege. I asked what happened to that man and if he ever successfully measured the world. Shea remained silent for a moment before shaking her head. She told me the man died. He had traveled at that unimaginable speed for a full year without ever encountering another train in the wilderness. One day, his friend's avatar simply grayed out, signaling his death and the destruction of his train. But his death wasn't worthless, she added. Because he traveled for a year without finding others, they concluded that the wilderness we traveled through their own distinct worlds. Unless the population in a sector reaches a certain threshold, they won't encounter each other. Suddenly, she produced a lollipop and popped it into her mouth, casually asking if I wanted one. When I thanked her but said I wasn't hungry, she grinned mischievously, telling me I was welcome because she wasn't planning on giving it to me anyway. It was her last one. She removed her nun's hat and stood up, clearly finished with that topic. She told me she would answer one last question before I'd have to find out the rest myself, warning me that my level was too low and knowing too much would only lead to overthinking. Then, contradicting herself, she produced another lollipop. Without waiting for me to speak, she unwrapped it and stuffed it directly into my mouth. It was sweet with a slightly bitter aftertaste, and the cooling sensation made me feel unexpectedly relaxed, wiping away the exhaustion from my earlier escape. When I pointed out that she'd lied about having only one left, she just remarked that the more beautiful a woman is, the better she lies. I crunched the candy and asked my final question. Did she know about the Run Company? I described what I had seen in Doomsday Town and Rainville Villa. She looked confused, admitting she didn't know the company. However, she noted that if I'd seen them across multiple stations, they were likely just one of many forces established by former conductors who grew tired of risking their lives and chose to settle down and influence certain stations. She told me the time was almost up and offered to show me her train. She clapped her hands, and Tina came running from behind the church. The girl happily took my hand and swung it playfully, thanking me for helping them. Shaya casually mentioned that Tina was her puppet, her finest creation. I rubbed my eyes, staring at the girl. She was completely indistinguishable from a real person. I even poked her cheek, wondering if she had once been human. A dark thought crossed my mind about Shea being some sealed demoness, and I realized I'd better stay on her good side, so I wouldn't end up as a puppet myself. Suddenly, the church began to tremble. Shea led Tina to the prayer platform and commanded the system to prepare for departure. I watched in a daze as light screens flashed everywhere. The church itself was the locomotive of her train. She tossed me a black box, calling it a reward for helping her open this world, and promising it would suit my current level. The church finished its transformation into a massive locomotive, and black tracks appeared beneath its wheels. In an instant, we were at the station outside town. I was stunned by the speed. Compared to her, my train moved like a snail. She revealed she was a level 57 conductor, a rank considered formidable even in her era. She explained that while conductor levels go high, everything else, platforms, items, treasure chests, maxes out at level 12. As she finished configuring the controls, she poked my cheek and gave me a final warning: never let the blasphemy card leave my possession. I sensed no malice in her voice, only a strange kind of teasing. I promised I wouldn't lose the one she gave me, and she urged me to synthesize my own soon for the tremendous benefits it would bring. She told me it was time for her to go. She could have taken my train with her, she said, but staying aboard forever would be dull. She invited me to enjoy the land until the docking countdown ended, and told me I could recycle the houses in town as I pleased. Her final request was for me to burn the place down after she left, as she never intended to return to the place that had imprisoned her for 15 years. Tina took my hand and told me it was time to disembark. She was so cute that I couldn't help but pat her head. Remembering her love for white forest fruit, I retrieved 10 blessed fruits for her. She was thrilled, and the aroma caught Shea's attention. I heard Shea muttering to herself about my blessing aura and how a level 3 train could have such rare carriages. She seemed genuinely fascinated by my talent as I carried my gift box outside. Standing on the platform, I saw the full majesty of her level 57 train, the Night Angel. It was a black and white masterpiece of 18 carriages, each exuding a luxury that made my own 2-car train look like a wreck. I felt a surge of genuine envy, though I tried to psych myself up by telling myself I'd surpass her one day. I found a friend request from her on my display. I really wanted to decline, but a forcibly transmitted message from her, complete with a mischievous emoji, made it clear that wasn't an option. I chose survival and accepted, but I sneakily edited her contact name to Golden Retriever. She caught me immediately, calling me a good boy and warning me that she could now track me anywhere. I quickly added a prefix, Evil Woman, Golden Retriever. The Night Angel's engines roared, shaking the town. Fireworks exploded in the sky as Shea bit into a new lollipop. She announced her departure, and the train vanished into the void, leaving Mystic Belltown in silence. I looked at the box she'd given me. It was a level 9 safety box, a 2x2 cube of absolute security that was impervious to damage or forced entry. I was stunned by the generosity. Even empty, the box was worth more than I could say. I quickly changed her contact name to Beautiful Kind-Hearted Lady and pressed my thumb to the center of the box to bind it and see what was inside. The binding notification flashed before my eyes, confirming the process was complete. I checked the safety box and found it categorizing my haul into neat slots. 1 flame stone, 10 kilograms of gold, another 10 of mithril, and finally, 3 vibrant lollipops. It seemed the box operated on a system of quality over quantity, keeping everything organized by type. I looked at the materials and felt a wave of calm. These were exactly what I needed to upgrade the train to level 4. Without my sublimation talent, finding a flamestone this early would have been a near impossible feat. Shea obviously had no inkling of my true abilities, so her gift was a perfectly calculated strategic boost, but the candy was what truly caught my attention. Upon closer inspection, the system identified them as Shea's healing lollipops, a level 8 masterpiece crafted by the Dark Nun herself. Consuming one would form a protective membrane against external damage, while rapidly mending wounds and restoring stamina. The note attached was clear. As long as I wasn't dead, these would ensure I stayed that way. Suddenly, a chime echoed as a message from Shea arrived. She asked if I liked her little surprise, reminding me that the jump from level 3 to level 4 is a major threshold. She explained that for most newcomers, flamestones are incredibly rare until at least the 10th station, so she was effectively saving me weeks of struggle. She warned me not to snack on the lollipops casually, and urged me to stay alive long enough to complete the blasphemy card. I read her words and felt a complicated surge of gratitude. Though I didn't strictly need the head start, I appreciated the gesture. I muttered a quiet thank you to the empty carriage, knowing that if I ever found another fragment of that card, I would stop at nothing to obtain it. I couldn't help but wonder what power would be unleashed if it were ever made whole. Meanwhile, far away in the infinite wilderness, the Night Angel thundered forward. Shea stood at her prayer platform, munching on a fruit while gazing at a horizon that never seemed to change. She received a message from a mysterious contact who expressed surprise at her return after 15 years. Shea simply replied that fate had chosen a new path, and that she was now focused on retribution. When asked about the Run Company, Shea expressed disdain at their reach, only to be told that the Heavenly Organization's inspectors had already vanished. Back in Mystic Belltown, the clock was ticking. I spent the remaining 20 minutes dismantling the houses Shea had left behind, though the manual labor was grueling. I managed to salvage a decent amount of wood, metal, and mechanical parts, though only about 1/10 of the original materials were recoverable. Shaya had designed the safety box to store entire carriages, which was a massive relief, but time was against me. By the time the countdown hit the final 10 minutes, I had to abandon the rest. I checked my resources. 645 kilograms of wood, 770 kilograms of metal, over 500 mechanical parts, and the precious gold and mithril. It was enough for a conventional upgrade, but I had a different gamble in mind. As Wally wobbled back toward me with a mysterious metal cube, curiosity finally won out. The system appraised it as a level 4 treasure chest. I ran my fingers over the cold surface, wondering if Shea had left it for me, or if it was simply a part of the town's hidden loot. I considered waiting until I could sublimate it to level 5, but I felt a strange, nagging resistance. My stamina and mental energy were high, yet something felt fundamentally blocked. I realized then that beyond level 4, everything, from chests to structures, resisted my talent. I refused to accept a plateau. If the talent itself was the limit, then I would simply have to change the talent. I popped one of the healing lollipops into my mouth, feeling my stamina surge back to full in an instant, and placed my hand on the chest. Instead of focusing on the box, I turned my power inward. I would sublimate my own sublimation talent. The world turned red. Blinding screens of warning text appeared as a massive energy surge shrouded the train. Conductors across the entire sector felt a momentary tremor of primal fear. Amidst the chaos of the red light, my consciousness faded into black. I drifted in a void, vaguely aware of distorted system messages. There was an error in the crossroads of fate. Something was trying to correct a selection, then failing. A countdown started. 5 seconds. 4. 3. By the time the timeout hit, the system randomly selected a destination, Hope Valley, a level 4 slaughter station. The train accelerated through the void. More errors appeared as a mysterious force tried to interfere with my departure, attempting to set the countdown to infinity to trap me forever. However, the train system fought back, eliminating the interference and resetting the clock. The new countdown was 10 hours. The station was marked as extremely dangerous. In the quiet of the train, my consciousness finally began to return. The train had already been stopped for 10 minutes when the sunlight streaming through the window hit my face, finally waking me from my deep slumber. The blinding glare forced me to look around in a daze, and as I peered outside, vast stretches of forest filled my vision. It was clear that this was no longer the wilderness, but a platform station. As I became fully conscious, the memories of what happened before I'd blacked out surged back like a tide. I looked down to find an ironclad chest lying quietly at my feet. It was a level 5 chest, meaning it worked. I had actually succeeded in that dangerous round of self-sublimation. I quickly pulled up my personal interface to check the talent section, and there it was. The description for sublimation had changed to include 4 crucial words. Ignores resistance. It was enough to let me know I had succeeded. A confident smile appeared on my face as I looked toward the Sentinel Tower device at the top of the train. The frustrating sensation of being unable to sublimate items beyond level 4 had vanished, and I realized that the shackles on my talent were finally broken. Despite my excitement, I began to cautiously inspect my surroundings. I vaguely recalled hearing strange sounds while I was unconscious, and I realized this randomly selected platform was a slaughter platform, the very last place I wanted to enter. I had no clue what the actual difference between slaughter and hunting was, considering I had never even stepped foot on a hunting platform. But the mystery was quickly overshadowed by the train system's records. As I read through the logs, my good mood faded, replaced by a heavy weight in my chest. There had been interference. Someone had tampered with my docking platform and duration. And although the train system had erased the meddling, the remaining countdown was staggering. I rubbed my eyes to ensure I hadn't misread the display, but it was real. 10 hours. I was trapped in a warning level, extremely dangerous platform for 10 hours, despite my train's usual stop time being only 5. There was no doubt that an unknown existence had tried to trap me here forever, and while the train system had proven itself fair and trustworthy by clearing that interference, I was still in a bind. My only saving grace was the VIP early departure privilege module. Yet even with that, I was looking at 7 more hours in this hell. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Since I was stuck here, the best course of action was to open the level 5 chest, hoping the loot would be enough to overwhelm a level 4 platform. As the lid opened, the rewards manifested. 10 train coins, 2 modules, and 2 level 5 items. The modules were system bind and in-station launch. I used them immediately, noting that they weren't physical cards and therefore couldn't be sublimated. The system bind module was particularly useful as it permanently moved the control base station's functions to me personally. No longer would I be inconvenienced by having to run back to the locomotive to identify items or check my info. The in-station launch module was equally vital, allowing me to move the train to specific target locations within a station at the cost of 1 train coin per hour. Next, I turned my attention to the Golden Strike card. It was a level 5 item that could increase the power of my next attack by 5 times, but I decided to push it further. I called upon my talent, feeling the drain on my stamina and spirit, though the cost of self-sublimation was notably less than before. It transformed into a level 6 golden critical card, capable of increasing an attack's power by 50 times. The thought of using such a jump in power on an enemy was enticing, so I slipped the card into my pocket, relieved that I wouldn't be helpless against truly formidable monsters. I then picked up the ever-accurate pocket watch. While a watch seemed like a simple reward for a level 5 item, the piece was beautiful, crafted from pure white materials with ornate golden patterns. It would provide the most precise time in any space-time, making it a handy tool to keep. Suddenly, a loud bang shattered the quiet. I looked toward the sound and saw crimson blood pooling in a clearing among the trees. The corpse of a dog-like monster, clutching a dagger in its mouth, bobbed to the surface of the blood. The Sentinel Tower's reveal ability had caught it, but the death of a single creature was just the beginning. The tower flared red as locking rings appeared on the ground. Monsters began charging out of the forest toward the train in a relentless wave. The gunfire became a constant roar as the Sentinel Tower went to full power, precisely targeting and killing every creature that entered the 100-meter forbidden zone. I breathed a little easier seeing the defense hold, but my heart grew heavier with every shot. If I hadn't possessed the Sentinel Tower and its reveal ability, I likely would have been torn apart by monsters sneaking into the train already. I found myself wondering about the true nature of this platform. In this world, the difference between hunting and slaughter was thin. While hunting meant killing the enemy, slaughter could easily mean being the one waiting in despair to be butchered. This encirclement was clearly designed by that unknown interference to ensure I died in this forest. I sat in the quiet of my carriage, staring at the screens with a cold, unwavering resolve because whoever wanted me dead was going to be sorely disappointed. I had already decided that no matter how dangerous this place claimed to be, it was still just a level 4 platform, and I was far from helpless. As the initial wave of slaughter began to taper off and the monster's desperate siege finally ceased, I climbed onto the roof of the train. I reached out to touch the warning device that was still hot from firing, and decided that a level 5 defense should be more than enough to handle a level 4 station. I initiated a sublimation, watching my spirit drop from 90 to 40, but the results were instantaneous and successful. The device transformed into a sentinel guard, and the jump in power was undeniable. It could now be armed with up to 9 different weapons and was capable of appearing anywhere on the train, extending its surveillance range to a full 150 meters. It would now automatically lock onto any hostile targets and dispel their illusions or stealth, while even possessing the ability to briefly detach and pursue threats. Best of all, I could activate an overlimit mode for a single train coin to double its attack speed if things grew truly dire. However, I wasn't finished with the upgrades. My level 4 installations weren't limited to the roof, so I moved to the third carriage where the surveillance device sat idle. It had seen little use while the Sentinel handled everything outside, but I knew I had to be prepared for the worst, because the Sentinel's eyes didn't cover the train's interior. If a monster managed to bypass the external detection, the surveillant would be my final line of defense. I poured 40 points of stamina and 10 of spirit into it, successfully sublimating it into an illusion surveillant. It was now capable of monitoring every corner of the train, sounding alarms and releasing disorienting illusions to trap any intruder. After 3 consecutive sublimations, a heavy exhaustion settled over me, yet I forced myself to keep moving. I returned to the lead carriage to gather both the mithril cross and the pure earthbound stone. While the mechanical sensors handled physical threats, these 2 items would be my shield against anything supernatural. I knew the pure earthbound stone still had untapped potential for one last sublimation, but with my energy so depleted, I had to be patient and wait for my recovery. I donned my bulletproof armor and tightened my grip on my black gloss pistol, preparing as thoroughly as possible. I was leaving this station alive no matter the cost. Before settling in, I remembered one more thing and activated Wally. Since I was already trapped here, it would be a waste not to gather whatever resources I could. With the preparations finally complete, I realized I was absolutely starving. I took meat and vegetables from my storage and set up a grill just outside the train, preparing lunch amidst the occasional sound of distant gunfire. After being unconscious for an entire day, I felt I truly deserved a proper meal. While the food sizzled, I checked the system logs and was surprised to find several updates following the completion of the 5th station. The restrictions on private trading and listing items on the trading platform from within a station had finally been lifted, and I could now list up to 5 items at once. This was excellent news, although I felt a brief pang of regret for missing the trading window while I was out cold. The private chat interface began to flicker with messages from my few contacts. Shangguan Yingshu reached out first, asking if I had felt the tremors, but her abrupt apology afterward left me puzzled about what had happened during my blackout. Zhao Lin also messaged me, thanking me for the help with her upgrade and sharing a photo of the snack shop she had reached for her 6th station. I felt a flicker of envy at her haul of snacks and alcohol, but I remained skeptical of her luck conservation talent. After all, good luck was always shadowed by inevitable misfortune, and for all I knew, she might end up in a place like this next. Finally, I saw a message from Li Xiaosheng, who was still peddling his empty alliance and claiming he would be the first to reach a level 3 train. He offered future help in exchange for my weapons, but the proposal was nothing more than a hollow promise from a man who acted like a shady corporate boss. Remembering the fishing rod incident, I realized he was a waste of time and promptly deleted him from my friend list. As I scrolled through my contacts, I noticed several names had turned gray, signifying destroyed trains and lost lives, which served as a grim reminder of Shea's warnings. I cleared the remaining chats and posted a bulk purchase request for gunpowder in the public channel, noting that only 2,453 survivors remained out of the original 10,000. The responses were slow, likely because many were still exploring without the modules that allowed them to access the system away from their trains. This was fine by me, as it meant my message wouldn't be buried. An hour had passed since I docked. Thanks to the Sentinel's efficiency, the 150-meter radius around the train had become a localized sanctuary. I sat there enjoying my grilled meat, a white forest fruit, and an iced beer I had traded from Zhao Lin. For a moment, it felt almost like a vacation in a scenic wood, and I chose to ignore the faint metallic scent of blood lingering in the air. I sat in the quiet of my carriage, staring at the screens with a cold, unwavering resolve, because whoever wanted me dead was going to be sorely disappointed. I had already decided that no matter how dangerous this place claimed to be, it was still just a level 4 platform, and I was far from helpless. As the initial wave of slaughter began to taper off and the monster's desperate siege finally ceased, I climbed onto the roof of the train. I reached out to touch the warning device that was still hot from firing, and decided that a level 5 defense should be more than enough to handle a level 4 station. I initiated a sublimation, watching my spirit drop from 90 to 40, but the results were instantaneous and successful. The device transformed into a sentinel guard, and the jump in power was undeniable. It could now be armed with up to 9 different weapons and was capable of appearing anywhere on the train, extending its surveillance range to a full 150 meters. It would now automatically lock onto any hostile targets and dispel their illusions or stealth, while even possessing the ability to briefly detach and pursue threats. Best of all, I could activate an overlimit mode for a single train coin to double its attack speed if things grew truly dire. However, I wasn't finished with the upgrades. My level 4 installations weren't limited to the roof, so I moved to the third carriage where the surveillant device sat idle. It had seen little use while the Sentinel handled everything outside, but I knew I had to be prepared for the worst, because the Sentinel's eyes didn't cover the train's interior. If a monster managed to bypass the external detection, the surveillant would be my final line of defense. I poured 40 points of stamina and 10 of spirit into it, successfully sublimating it into an illusion surveillant. It was now capable of monitoring every corner of the train, sounding alarms and releasing disorienting illusions to trap any intruder. After 3 consecutive sublimations, a heavy exhaustion settled over me, yet I forced myself to keep moving. I returned to the lead carriage to gather both the mithril cross and the pure earthbound stone. While the mechanical sensors handled physical threats, these 2 items would be my shield against anything supernatural. I knew the pure earthbound stone still had untapped potential for one last sublimation, but with my energy so depleted, I had to be patient and wait for my recovery. I donned my bulletproof armor and tightened my grip on my black gloss pistol, preparing as thoroughly as possible. I was leaving this station alive, no matter the cost. Before settling in, I remembered one more thing and activated Wally. Since I was already trapped here, it would be a waste not to gather whatever resources I could. With the preparations finally complete, I realized I was absolutely starving. I took meat and vegetables from my storage and set up a grill just outside the train, preparing lunch amidst the occasional sound of distant gunfire. After being unconscious for an entire day, I felt I truly deserved a proper meal. While the food sizzled, I checked the system logs and was surprised to find several updates following the completion of the 5th station. The restrictions on private trading and listing items on the trading platform from within a station had finally been lifted, and I could now list up to 5 items at once. This was excellent news, although I felt a brief pang of regret for missing the trading window while I was out cold. The private chat interface began to flicker with messages from my few contacts. Shangguan Yingshui reached out first, asking if I had felt the tremors, but her abrupt apology afterward left me puzzled about what had happened during my blackout. Zhao Lin also messaged me, thanking me for the help with her upgrade and sharing a photo of the snack shop she had reached for her 6th station. I felt a flicker of envy at her haul of snacks and alcohol, but I remained skeptical of her luck conservation talent. After all, good luck was always shadowed by inevitable misfortune, and for all I knew, she might end up in a place like this next. Finally, I saw a message from Li Xiaosheng, who was still peddling his empty alliance and claiming he would be the first to reach a level 3 train. He offered future help in exchange for my weapons, but the proposal was nothing more than a hollow promise from a man who acted like a shady corporate boss. Remembering the fishing rod incident, I realized he was a waste of time and promptly deleted him from my friend list. As I scrolled through my contacts, I noticed several names had turned gray, signifying destroyed trains and lost lives, which served as a grim reminder of Shea's warnings. I cleared the remaining chats and posted a bulk purchase request for gunpowder in the public channel, noting that only 2,453 survivors remained out of the original 10,000. The responses were slow, likely because many were still exploring without the modules that allowed them to access the system away from their trains. This was fine by me, as it meant my message wouldn't be buried. An hour had passed since I docked. Thanks to the Sentinel's efficiency, the 150-meter radius around the train had become a localized sanctuary. I sat there enjoying my grilled meat, a white forest fruit, and an iced beer I had traded from Zhao Lin. For a moment, it felt almost like a vacation in a scenic wood, and I chose to ignore the faint, metallic scent of blood lingering in the air. After eating and drinking my fill, my mind began to clear, and I realized that while this slaughter platform seemed to demand only a passive defense, that didn't mean I was forced to sit idly by. The monster corpses left in the wake of my Sentinel guards were more than just eyesores. If I could collect and recycle them at the processing station, they would undoubtedly yield some valuable gains. Without hesitation, I took action. I purchased a large bamboo basket on the trading platform, threaded some ropes through it to sling it over my back, and tied a sharp dagger to the end of a wooden stick to create a simple hooked sickle. During the brief lulls after the Sentinel had finished its grim work, I hurried out into the clearing to drag the carcasses back to the train. One by one, the remains of level 2 blackhorn hunting dogs, level 3 swift fierce snakes, and level 3 assassin lizards were fed into the processing station. The harvest was substantial. I obtained 10 portions of hunting dog meat, 5 of snake meat, and 10 of lizard meat. Beyond the food, I recovered specialized materials like an assassin lizard skin, which promised to slightly reduce my presence when carried, and a corrosive hunting dog dagger. I quickened my pace, moving freely within the 150-meter safety zone, confident that as long as I stayed within the Sentinel's lock-on range, these monsters couldn't touch me. So far, this slaughter platform had provided more of a bounty than a burden, as my level 5 Sentinel guards proved overwhelmingly dominant against any creature level 4 or lower. Even when an occasional beast tide attempted to swarm the perimeter, a quick activation of the overlimit mode was enough to repel them effortlessly. Between the automated defenses and my own prowess as a marksman, aided by the Judgment of Gunfire module and armor-piercing rounds, the forest had essentially become my personal slaughterhouse. I knew my equipment was powerful enough to pierce even Shea's puppets, so these flesh and blood monsters stood no chance. However, after 5 hours of constant engagement, the danger revealed itself in the form of my ammunition count. I had started with nearly 1,000 rounds, but despite our perfect accuracy, fewer than 400 remained. As the sky began to darken, the monsters seemed to grow more wary. The sight of their fallen kin and the heavy scent of blood in the air acted as a warning, keeping them wandering just outside the death zone as if they were waiting for something to change. I checked my gemstone inlaid pocket watch. The time was 1812. With night approaching, I had no intention of pushing my luck further into the woods. I lit a campfire with my lighter and prepared a fresh piece of snake meat, skewering it over the flames. My efforts had netted me 810 kilograms of various meats, now safely stored in my units where the storage carriage's unique properties would keep them from rotting. As the meat roasted, I pulled up the system light screen to check the chat room. The survivor count had dropped to 2,044. It seemed the 6th station had claimed many more lives while I was occupied. The chat was a frantic mix of panic and desperation, with people realizing the next night's survival event was imminent. Some were terrified, still stuck with level 1 trains and lacking the resources to upgrade to the 40-kilometer speed required to outrun the coming darkness. I watched as people begged for metal and parts, willing to trade every scrap of food and water they possessed just to survive the night. Others pointed toward Li Shaosheng's alliance, though the reports were grim. He was charging sky-high prices, demanding a train coin for a mere 15 kilograms of metal. His lackeys were in the chat defending the Brother Li monopoly, claiming only he was brave enough to sell materials now, even as they hiked the price to 10 kilograms per coin. Looking at the 2,000 remaining conductors, I realized about a tenth of them were still trapped behind that level 1 threshold. Whether through poor choices or sheer misfortune, they were now desperate enough to spend anything to bridge the gap. I still had 16 train coins, but I knew the next round of upgrades would be expensive. If there was an opportunity to earn more, I wasn't going to pass it up. I composed a message and sent it into the fray, offering 30 kilograms of metal or wood or 20 mechanical parts for a single train coin. My prices were far more reasonable than Li Shaosheng's, and I made it clear that quantities were limited and the terms were non-negotiable. The reaction was instantaneous. While some called me a bloodsucker, the majority of the chat recognized the value. Desperate conductors flooded my private messages, while Li Shaosheng's supporters tried to trash my reputation, only to be shut down by those grateful for a fair alternative. I ignored the petty squabbles entirely. My listings on the trading interface sold out in a heartbeat, and in an instant, my wealth grew by another 10 train coins. The chat room remained a cacophony of noise, filled with voices begging for material listings while a relentless flood of private messages overwhelmed my inbox. I decided to list another batch of resources, but the return was meager, only 3 train coins. It wasn't that the demand had vanished, but rather that almost no one actually possessed the coins anymore. Treasure chests were becoming a rare luxury in this world. Reflecting on my own journey, I realized that without Wally's specialized assistance, the only chest I likely would have found was that initial one from the armory. No chests meant no coins, and no coins meant a lack of resources for the upgrades essential to surviving the next night. It was a cycle of certain death for many, but I reminded myself that it had nothing to do with me. I couldn't save everyone. Listing materials was a business move to harvest what few coins remained. In my eyes, if a conductor couldn't manage their first upgrade after 6 stations, they simply weren't cut out for this environment. As I scanned the desperate pleas for trades, I noticed a recurring pattern. Almost none of them offered anything of value to prove they were worth the effort. Then, a message from someone named Pang Wenxuan caught my eye. He claimed to have only 1 blueprint left and was desperate for 30 kilograms of metal to save his train. A blueprint was always worth a look, though I found it strange that even a low-tier one hadn't fetched him resources from someone else. I asked what it was, and he responded with frantic gratitude, sending over the details for a level 1 wooden bow. I had to take back my earlier curiosity. It was no wonder he couldn't sell it. In an age of guns and crossbows, how many people actually knew how to handle a bow? It required skill and strength, unlike the simple aim and pull mechanics of a firearm, and this didn't even include arrows. Still, a blueprint was a blueprint. While it was useless to the masses, it held potential for me. I agreed to the trade. Pang Wenxuan wept with joy at my acceptance, calling me a good person and promising repayment. I merely scratched my head at the good person label. These days, such a remark felt more like an insult than a compliment. I didn't dwell on his promise of repayment, as I suspected this would be our final interaction. If he was only just reaching level 2 now, the escalating difficulty would likely swallow him whole. Once the transaction was complete, I turned to my true goal, sublimation. A trash-tier level 1 blueprint could become something far more formidable in my hands. I poured a small amount of spirit into it, watching the level 1 bow evolve into a level 2 black hardwood bow. I checked the requirements, 10 kilograms of wood and a bit of fiber, and crafted it immediately. Then, I pushed it further.